My parents refused to pay for college. When my aunt and uncle helped me graduate, they bragged and sent insulting emails to them. Hello, Reddit. My 20F graduation from a relatively well-known school, at least in this state, is in 2 weeks. We are only permitted 4 tickets per pupil. The school isn't being stingy. The graduation ceremony takes place at the university's main auditorium, which can only accommodate a limited number of people. My graduating class is enormous. I purchased 3 tickets. I invited my Aunt Donna, Uncle Kevin, and Cousin Jeremy. I didn't invite my parents, Esther and Frank. And there is the problem. It all began in high school, during my junior year. My parents summoned me to the living room for a family meeting. It wasn't about anything I'd done wrong, which was reassuring. It was about money. They set me down on the sofa, and my father, Frank, cleared his throat and went into his planned speech. He explained that they were becoming older and needed to focus on their retirement. They argued they had their own lives to live and futures to plan, which did not involve paying for my college degree. My mother, Esther, emphasized that I was about to turn 18 and become a legal adult, therefore I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. I recall sitting there and nodding slowly. I wasn't surprised, not really. I believe a part of me had always expected it. To say the least, my parents were frugal with me. They were not poor at all. They lived nicely, but they were always cautious with their money, particularly when it came to me. Asking for anything, including needs, felt like a negotiation. New clothing? Only if I had clearly outgrown the old ones. Even then, I'd get a lecture about how costly everything was and how I should be grateful for what I had. A school trip? I had to virtually beg them to let me leave. It was not because they couldn't afford it. They did not want to. So the college announcement was not a surprise. It was only confirmation. Fortunately, I had a backup plan. I'd spoken with Uncle Kevin, my father's older brother, a few months before. I had always felt closer to him and his family than to my own parents. My parents, especially when I was small, were constantly busy. They led a highly active social life. They dropped me up at Uncle Kevin and Aunt Donna's house, sometimes for the entire weekend. I basically grew up there. Aunt Donna never grumbled and never made me feel like a burden. She and Uncle Kevin pampered me like I was their own daughter. My cousin Jeremy, who is 4 years older than me, was like the big brother I never had. So I went to see Uncle Kevin, not expecting him to pay for everything. I was going to ask him to co-sign a student loan, but before I could say anything, he said, "Don't worry about college. Donna and I will take care of it. All you have to do is study." Aunt Donna immediately consented, stating that I was family and that they were pleased to help. I offered several times to repay them once I graduated and got a job, but they refused. They are both doctors. He is a surgeon and she is a pediatrician, so they are financially secure. Jeremy had already graduated from college, so they didn't have any more tuition bills. Let's fast forward to the present. Graduation is quickly approaching. I received the tickets, forwarded them to my aunt and uncle, and forgot about my parents. I honestly thought they wouldn't care. Since I entered college, our connection has grown even more distant. I'd travel home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but we barely talked. They'd be busy with their pals, throwing parties or going out. I would generally end up driving over to my uncle's house, which was about an hour away. Jeremy and I would try to schedule visits home so that we could all spend time together. It felt normal. It felt like family. Then, last week, the phone call occurred. It was afternoon. My mother called, making small conversation at first. "How are your classes going? Are you excited about graduation?" It felt forced and unnatural. Then my father called. He cleared his throat, as he had in high school, and inquired, "So, have you decided who you're inviting to the graduation ceremony?" I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I just shouted, "I've already invited Uncle Kevin, Aunt Donna, and Jeremy." Silence. Then I heard my mother's voice, which was shrill and strained. "You didn't invite your own parents?" I tried to explain about the few tickets and how small the auditorium was, but my father interrupted me. He began speaking, his voice rising with every syllable. "I've been telling everyone about your graduation. All my friends. I've been bragging about how you're graduating from a pretty good college, how proud I am. I'll look like a complete fool if I'm not even there. Your mother and I will be humiliated." That was when I snapped. All those years of feeling like an afterthought, like a burden, like I was less essential than their social life, it all came rushing out. "You haven't even asked me about college in 4 years," I was screaming. "You're always too busy with your friends, spending money on fancy dinners and vacations. You told me I was on my own," my mother started yelling back. "We raised you. We put a roof over your head, clothes on your back. We invested so much time and money in you. And this is how you repay us? With ingratitude. Invested? I replied. You did the bare minimum, and you were the ones who decided not to pay for college. You told me very clearly that I was an adult and had to take care of myself. I told them exactly what happened in the living room. I informed them that Uncle Kevin and Aunt Donna had been there for me, that they were my true family. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. I instantly banned their numbers on my phone. I needed to speak to someone. I called Uncle Kevin. I spewed out the entire story. He listened patiently and without interrupting. When I was finished, he stated calmly and reassuringly, "You did what you had to do. Don't doubt yourself for a second, kid. You're part of our family, and we're proud of you." 2 days later, I received an email from my father. It was a lengthy email, filled with excuses and backhanded apologies. He said that they didn't spend much money on me growing up because they wanted me to be humble and grateful. He explained that they had always believed we had a close and loving relationship and that all they wanted was for me to be independent. He added that they were saddened that I had misread their behavior and chosen my uncle's family above them. He begged me to unblock them and send them graduation tickets. He swore they would not put anything on social media and that they only wanted a chance to mend our relationship. He even had the arrogance to complain that I had invited my cousin, Jeremy, but not them. I felt deep down that it was all a ruse, that they were only attempting to save face. But it still stings. Aitia for not inviting my parents to the graduation ceremony. Edit. Several folks have asked for extra context. One query was why my parents were so concerned in bragging about my graduation. My college is quite prestigious. It is consistently regarded as one of the state's best business schools, and its alumni network is very active and prominent. I suppose graduating from there is a status signal in their social circles. Another question was why I stayed in contact with my parents for so long, despite their emotional distance. It's complicated. I had nowhere else to live throughout the school year. I know my uncle would have welcomed me with open arms, but I felt awkward asking. I did not want to be a burden. Staying in touch was motivated by a combination of obligation and habit. I was accustomed to being on the perimeter of their lives. It felt normal. And, truthfully, there was a small part of me that hoped things would change. That they would somehow become the parents I had always desired. Update 1. Okay, I made my selection. I am not going to answer my parents' emails, and I am definitely blocking them. I reread the email multiple times, attempting to evaluate it objectively. And as I read it, I realized they had not apologized for anything. They simply made a series of reasons and justifications for their behavior. They tried to make me feel bad and question my own perceptions. Then came the surprise. My Aunt Donna and Uncle Kevin were supposed to fly in on the day of the graduation ceremony, but they called me yesterday to say they had changed their flights. They arrived 2 days early. They stated that they wanted to spend some quality time with me before the graduation festivities began. I was overjoyed. Having them here in person made a huge difference. We went out to supper yesterday night, just the three of us. I finally felt safe talking to my uncle about the whole situation with my parents. I informed him about their email, and how they said they only wanted to impress their friends. Uncle Kevin simply groaned and shook his head. He stated, "That sounds exactly like your father. He's always been that way." He then started to tell me stories about my father from their childhood. Apparently, even as a teenager, my father was fascinated with social standing. He constantly aspired to befriend the wealthiest, most popular kids, despite the fact that their family was, as Uncle Kevin put it, solidly middle class, nothing extravagant. He clarified, "My dad and mom met in college at a fraternity party and bonded over their shared ambition to climb the social ladder." Uncle Kevin then became serious. He informed me that many of my father's current friends, the folks he is so eager to impress, are not exactly role models. He claimed to have heard reports about extramarital affairs, unethical business methods, and other such things. But they all kept the appearance of respectability, of being wonderful, happy families. He felt it was ridiculous that my father, at his age, cared so much about what these people thought, especially when it meant compromising his connection with his own daughter. Hearing all of this from my uncle, someone I totally trust, was quite reassuring. It confirmed what I had long suspected. My parents' priorities were totally distorted. They prioritized looks above actual relationships. Any remaining shame I felt had vanished. Graduation is in 3 days. I'm trying not to worry about what my folks might do. I'm hoping they'll stay away and know they've lost. But a part of me is prepared for some sort of public spectacle. Some try to shame me or manipulate the situation. Update 2, Graduation Day. It has finally arrived. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Everything I hoped for. I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma, and felt an incredible sense of success. My Aunt Donna, Uncle Kevin, and Jeremy, who came just in time for the ceremony after working all night to finish a work project, were the loudest cheers in the audience. I saw them gleaming with pride. It meant everything to me. Following the ceremony, we took the required photos. I wore my cap and gown with my aunt and uncle, Jeremy, and others of my classmates. We were all laughing, feeling relieved and excited. Then we exited the auditorium. We were on our way to a local restaurant, a really good Italian eatery that Uncle Kevin had reserved weeks in advance for a celebratory meal. That's when it occurred. My phone started buzzing like crazy. Notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and even text messages from relatives I hadn't spoken with in years. My Uncle Kevin's phone also started vibrating. Then Aunt Donna's. Then Jeremy's. My folks had gone social media crazy. They'd gone on a long, rambling, tremendously hateful diatribe over several platforms, accusing me of being a selfish, ungrateful kid and accusing my aunt and uncle of brainwashing and snatching me away from them. I couldn't view the post since I had blocked it. But my relatives began emailing us screenshots. It was awful. They claimed I had demanded that they pay for my college tuition because I was envious that my Aunt Donna and Uncle Kevin had paid for Jeremy's schooling. They reiterated the weary old narrative about wanting to raise me to be humble and self-sufficient. They claimed I ran crying to my uncle, who used the incident to poison me against my parents. The worst thing, however, was what they said about my aunt and uncle's miscarriage, which made my stomach churn and my blood boil. They claimed that my aunt and uncle were resentful and jealous since they had lost a child a few years before Jeremy was born. They said that my aunt and uncle were projecting their pain and longing onto me, treating me as if I were the daughter they never had. They even went so far as to claim that the miscarriage was divine retribution, meaning that my aunt and uncle were unworthy of having another child. That was a lie. A vicious, twisted, and repulsive lie. It's true that my Aunt Donna miscarried. It occurred some months before I was born. They didn't know the baby's gender, but my aunt always suspected it was a girl. When I was born, they were pleased. They have always been really kind, caring, and supporting. It was beyond comprehension to witness my parents weaponize that tragedy, attacking my aunt and uncle and attempting to make me feel guilty. I stood on the pavement outside the restaurant, shivering with wrath and astonishment. I wanted to unlock my parents and expose them for the disgusting monsters they were. But Uncle Kevin stopped me. He placed his hand on my arm. "Don't," he insisted, his voice calm but firm. "Don't give them the satisfaction. They want a reaction. They want to drag you into the mud with them. Don't let them." He said he'd handle it. He stated he will call his lawyer and look into legal alternatives. He added that everyone in the family knew what my father was like, and that no one would take the role seriously. They sent us screenshots out of astonishment and contempt, not because they believed any of it. We headed into the restaurant. I tried to forget about it and focus on celebrating my accomplishment. It was difficult, but my aunt, uncle, and Jeremy tried their best to distract me. They told some funny stories. They prepared toast. They kept the discourse lighthearted and upbeat. They reassured me, in their own quiet ways, that I was loved, supported, and part of their family. I'm not sure if my parents ever took the posts down. I do not care. I haven't checked and won't. Update 3. It's been a little more than 2 weeks since graduation and the social media frenzy. Life has calmed down somewhat. I've been entirely absorbed in the job search. Sending out resumes, writing cover letters, and attending interviews. It's been a tough process, but it's a nice break from the family drama. I'm still residing at my Uncle Kevin's house. Obviously, returning to my parents' residence was not an option. Staying with my aunt and uncle has been a lifesaver. We eat supper together most nights and watch movies on weekends, just being together in this comfortable, supporting way. It feels like how a family should be. I found out indirectly, via a chat between my Aunt Donna and one of my cousins, that my Uncle Kevin did, in fact, contact my father following the social media posts. It was not a casual phone call, it was a formal communication between lawyers. My uncle, who knows a lawyer who specializes in defamation cases, had a letter written threatening legal action if my father didn't immediately remove all of the posts and give a public apology. Apparently, my father tried to bluster and argue at first, but when he realized my uncle was serious, he backed down. The posts disappeared. There was no apology, of course, but I wasn't expecting one. You'd assume that was it, right? That my parents would eventually realize they had gone too far, that they had destroyed the bridge beyond repair? You would be wrong. A few days ago, I got another email. Naturally, I was on guard. Following the graduation incident, I became extremely cautious about checking sender addresses before opening anything. This one came from a fresh email account that I did not recognize. The subject line was simply, "We need to talk, Mom and Dad." My first instinct was to delete it, block the sender, and pretend nothing happened. But curiosity, that insidious little voice, got the best of me. I told myself I only wanted to see what they would say once everything had transpired. I opened the email. It was shorter than the previous one, but equally manipulative. They began by expressing their extreme disappointment in my behavior. They accused me of ungratefulness and rudeness. They reinforced their assertion that my Uncle Kevin and Aunt Donna were influencing me and did not have my best interests in mind. Then they changed strategies. They said they'd been speaking with a family counselor, which I strongly doubted, and that the counselor had suggested they try to reach out to me one last time to give an olive branch. They offered to pardon me for my faults if I agreed to meet with them in person to discuss our concerns. They advised us to meet in a neutral area. They even suggested a certain day and hour. I didn't respond. I didn't even consider it. However, in a moment of weakness, I did not immediately block the email address. I told myself I was only exploring my alternatives and getting information. It was a stupid error. 2 days later, another email came from the same address. This one was different. This one was awful. The subject line said, "Disappointed in you, Mom and Dad." I paused. But once again, morbid curiosity won out. I opened it. It began with the usual accusations. That I was ungrateful, disrespectful, and had been brainwashed by my uncle and aunt. But then things took a dark, unsettling turn. They said that my uncle's threat of legal action was proof that he was hiding something. They stated that he and my aunt were unstable and unsuited to be with me. They then rehashed the horrifying story about my aunt's miscarriage. They said, and I'm quoting here, "The only reason they lost their baby was because they weren't the right kind of people to have a girl. God made your aunt have that miscarriage because he knew they weren't fit to be parents. They instructed me to wake up and come home before it's too late." This time, I did not hesitate. I slammed my laptop closed. I instantly banned the email address. Then I did something I hadn't done in several weeks. I cried. Not silent, dignified weeping, but hideous, gasping sobbing. I haven't informed my Uncle Kevin or Aunt Donna about the new email. I cannot bring myself to do it. I understand how much that would hurt them. They've been quite kind. I do not want to burden children with my parents' toxic hostility. I'm keeping it to myself for now, but it's eating away at me. I feel the need to accomplish something, but I'm not sure what. Update 4, it's been several months now. The best news, I got a job. This is an entry-level position, it's not my ideal employment, but it's a step in the right direction for my career. The work is engaging, and the individuals are surprisingly friendly. My direct supervisor is a young woman in her late 20s, and she has been quite encouraging and helpful. And I moved out of my Uncle Kevin's place. That was a major stride. I've been feeling a little bad, as if I'd overstayed my welcome, despite their insistence that I hadn't. I found a little one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood around 15 minutes away from my uncle and aunt's house. The first several nights felt odd. I was used to the sounds from my uncle's place. My apartment was quiet, but I'm adjusting. I purchased some inexpensive furniture from a thrift store, placed some posters on the walls, and began to make the space feel like home. I even adopted a scruffy little tabby cat. He's been an excellent companion, a furry little ball of chaos that keeps me entertained. I still see my Aunt Donna and Uncle Kevin on a regular basis. I come over for dinner at least once a week, sometimes more. My parents, however, remain silent. I haven't heard from them since the last hateful email. I blocked them on every platform I could think of, including email, social media, and phone. I've even considered changing my phone number just to be safe. I've heard through the family grapevine, my cousin Jeremy keeps me updated, much to my aunt's dismay, that they're continuing to live their lives as if nothing happened. They're still attending their fancy dinner parties, posting carefully curated photos on Instagram, and pretending to be the ideal happy family. I suppose some things never change. I have also started seeing a therapist. In fact, Uncle Kevin made the suggestion. He noticed that I was still struggling, despite getting the job and moving out. He gently suggested that speaking with a professional would help me process everything that had happened. I was hesitant at first. I'd always been a private person, not one to express my emotions easily. But I trusted my uncle and knew he was correct. I'm focusing on creating my own life. I'm concentrating on my career. I am concentrating on my furry little companion cat. Reddit, I appreciate everything you've done for me. I paid for my Miles' 50th birthday party while her children did nothing. However, she banned me at the last minute, so I canceled everything. I am a 26-year-old female. I've been married to my hubby, 29, for over 3 years. I've always known that my husband's family doesn't particularly like me. My husband has 2 younger twin sisters, 23 female, and a younger brother, 21, who do not seem to like me. This also applies to my mother-in-law. I've never figured out why they dislike me so much, but I was determined to rectify it since I wanted to have a decent relationship with my in-laws. So I decided to prepare for my mother-in-law's 50th birthday celebration this year. My husband urged me against it, stating that if his family does not appear to like me, I should just leave it alone rather than go out of my way to be pleasant and win them over. But I ignored it because I wanted to stay on good terms with them. I'm a people person, and I couldn't handle the thought of these individuals disliking me for no apparent reason. I had to set things right. So, a few days ago, I began preparing the party and even attempted to enlist my husband's siblings. But they were uninterested and informed me that I could handle everything myself if I wanted. I reserved one of my mother-in-law's favorite restaurants, where she and her late husband would frequently go on dates, and paid for all of the food and decor ahead of time. In reality, I oversaw it all myself to ensure that everything met my mother-in-law's taste and standards, as she was very picky about such things. I even invited some of her closest friends and relatives after discussing with my husband about who she wanted there. Essentially, I paid for everything and organized it all on my own, with a little help from my spouse, whereas her own children did nothing to assist and did not even contribute financially. We went to see her yesterday, the day before her birthday, against my husband's objections. When we arrived, we observed that her other children were already there, and they seemed shocked to see us but said nothing. After some small talk, I got to the point and informed her that we'd be expecting her at the restaurant in the evening tomorrow since we had something planned for her. She smiled and thanked my husband, but he informed her that it was all on me and that she should thank me. Her expression deteriorated abruptly, and I was perplexed for a moment. I informed her that I had invited all of her close friends and some of her family members, as well as selected all of her favorite foods, in an attempt to persuade her to notice my efforts. But a hateful expression appeared on her face, and she proceeded to say thanks in the most phony, sugar-coated tone before telling me that, while she appreciated my efforts, she was sorry she would not be able to come. I was astonished and asked her why. She replied that she wanted her 50th birthday to be memorable, so she planned a family-only affair. She stated that she considered her friends to be family, but she did not consider me to be family at all. So she would prefer it if I made myself unavailable the following day. My husband and I were stunned to the core, and I realized in that instant that he had been correct all along. I should never have put forth any effort because she was clearly never going to appreciate anything, ever. My husband's siblings, on the other hand, appeared to be about to bust out laughing any second, which irritated me even more. So I stood up and told her that she could go to hell, and that if she dared to show up tomorrow, I'd have security escort her away. That took the smug expressions off everyone's faces. My mother-in-law said I was frigid and cruel. I immediately laughed in her face, saying that was quite rich coming from her. After some back and forth in which she attempted to persuade me that I was incorrect, I informed her that she did not deserve anything pleasant and that my decision was definitive. She and her children appeared furious. She started crying just before I left, most likely as a last-ditch effort to make me feel horrible, but I didn't care. I was furious. I tried to cancel the reservation while driving home, but it was too late. My husband appeared to be uncomfortable with the situation, but he refused to say anything more than that I did the right thing. When we got home, he went outside for a smoke, which was great with me because he had never been particularly expressive with his family and preferred to keep out of these situations. Furthermore, I had ignored his advice, so it was good of him not to shove it in my face. Anyway, since I'd already paid for the venue and food, I decided to rescind all of the invitations. It was really last minute and annoyed a lot of the visitors, but they were largely my mother-in-law's friends, so I didn't mind. Instead, I invited some of my own pals to make it all worthwhile, as I was very angry by all that had happened. My husband also joined in, and I convinced him to bring a couple of his friends so we could party. We took rid of the decorations just in time before they arrived and had a great time. I posted all of the photos once I returned home today. My sister-in-law texted me, claiming I had spoiled her mother's birthday and that it was really selfish of me to utilize the venue for myself, especially given how much it meant to my mother-in-law. I don't feel very regretful for what I did, and I believe it was absolutely justified. I only hope I'm right. ATA for canceling my mother-in-law's scheduled birthday celebration after she informed me that I was not welcome. Update 1. I informed my husband of the message his sister had sent me and asked whether I should apologize to his family. He answered, absolutely not. In fact, he informed me that he'd had enough of their behavior and believed it would be best if we cut them off completely. This was a significant deal because his family relied heavily on him for money and other necessities, particularly my mother-in-law. My husband is relatively wealthy and owns his own business, so cutting him off would force her to rely on her other children. That was a problem because my husband's siblings were unemployed and changed jobs every few months. To be honest, they were all heavily reliant on him for money and other necessities, so this was a major decision. I tried to discourage him from doing so, but he was determined. I am sure there is something deeper going on here. To be honest, I've always seen that as we dated, his family grew increasingly distant from him. He had grown apart from his family by the time we married. It wasn't his fault, since I recall him telling me several times that he would bring his family over for supper while we were dating and even throughout the early days of our marriage. But they would always find an excuse to avoid it. I felt certain that I was also part of the reason. That was another element that drove me to establish a friendship with my in-laws, so that my spouse could reconnect with his family. I'm confident that there is anything my husband isn't or hasn't told me. He isn't the type of person to desert his family. Previously, he told me how important family was to him. So this unexpected decision, while reasonable in light of how my mother-in-law treated me a few days ago, is unusual and out of character for him. I'm determined to get to the bottom of this because I don't want my spouse to be miserable or resentful of me in the future. I'm just hoping he feels comfortable enough to tell me why he took such dramatic measures now. Update 2. After much pestering, my spouse finally spoke up about why he is splitting off his family after all these years. I knew his father died when he was 21, and all of his siblings were in school at the time. His mother had never worked a day in her life, so it was up to him to get to work and be the provider for the family, as the money his father had left him would not be enough to cover everything. He worked hard all day and night. Finally, when he was around 23, he found some investors for his startup, and things began to improve for him. He moved from barely scraping by to flourishing, which was excellent for him. But it made his family extremely lazy and materialistic. They were increasingly reliant on him as he earned more money. But he didn't say anything or complain because he felt obligated to do so, as his father would have expected. They also mistreated his girlfriends, believing that having other people in his life would distract him and that his primary goal should be to care for his family. This is why, when we met and it became evident that I wasn't someone they could simply mistreat and drive away, because I was so desperate to remain with my husband, they were irritated by my very presence and attempted to poison my husband against me. But by then, he'd had enough. During our relationship, there was a lot of fighting and bickering behind my back. His family pushed him to break up with me, but he was determined to marry me. They eventually distanced themselves from him in an attempt to guilt-trip him, but they continued to approach him for money. This strategy likewise failed to separate us. Several years later, we're still going strong. After the whole birthday incident, my husband told me that when his sister contacted me to guilt-trip me, his mother called him to do the same to him. She was trying to emotionally manipulate him into leaving me after I insulted her. That's why he decided he'd had enough and it was time to move on. I'm still shocked that his family put him through this, despite the fact that he was the one who supported them the entire time. I've pretty much lost all respect for them because they're just so greedy. I'm so glad I opted to continue with my husband despite his family's attempts to separate us and drive me away so they could take his money. To be honest, I don't care how much money he has since I love him for who he is, regardless of his monetary balance. Now that I know the whole story, I'm shocked he was able to put up with it all and even keep it a secret from me for so long only to spare my feelings, as I wanted to have a good relationship with my in-laws. But he knew that would never happen. I believe he is making the correct choice right now, and his family deserves to be cut off. They're extremely selfish and greedy, and they show no regard for the one man who has had their back for so long, despite all odds. Update 3. My husband finally phoned his mother and told her that he doesn't want to hear from her or his siblings unless they modify their behavior. He also told them that they would have to find their own source of money because he would not be able to support them indefinitely. As I had predicted, this action was met with outrage on their end. I could hear my mother-in-law yelling at my husband even though his phone was not on loudspeaker. They got into a really vicious quarrel. Because I was in the same room with my spouse, I heard all he said. My mother-in-law clearly attempted to blame me for this. She said that I must have influenced his decision to cut them off somehow. She also accused me of wanting to split their family up. She advised my husband to avoid being manipulated by his wife. Again, The irony of her instructing my husband not to allow himself to be influenced amused me. Naturally, my husband defended me to the best of his ability. He also told her that his siblings should get excellent jobs because they are all adults now, and it's pathetic that they still have to rely on him to care for them. She began accusing my husband of becoming obsessed with the money and power that came with holding such a high-paying career. She said that I was probably urging him to split off his family, which is why he was treating his own blood so harshly. It was textbook manipulation and emotional blackmail to keep him under her control. But now that I knew what she and her other children had been up to, I wasn't going to let it happen again. When things got too hot and I could see my husband becoming agitated and teary-eyed from frustration, I decided to step in. I informed her that my husband's mind was made up. If she and her children don't get in line soon, they will lose my husband's support forever. Now the ball was in their court. They could either behave decently and respect me and my spouse in order to continue to be in our lives. Or they may be the blood-sucking, materialistic a-holes they were and be kicked out of my husband's life completely. Having said that, I hung up and silenced all notifications on my husband's phone so he didn't have to deal with them for a bit and could relax. It's been an hour since the call ended, and we've set aside our phones to watch a movie and distract ourselves for the time being. Update 4. Because pestering my husband and destroying his day wasn't enough, my mother-in-law chose to annoy me instead. After the movie, my spouse decided to finish some pending work, while I checked my phone. My mother-in-law missed several calls and sent me numerous texts stating filthy things. They were filled with curse words from my husband's siblings. I wasn't surprised, though, because this was exactly what I anticipated them to do. I just took screenshots for later and disregarded it. I spent the next 10 minutes responding to business emails and other correspondence. But then my mother-in-law called again, and I mistakenly accepted the call. She then continued to say the most offensive things about me and my upbringing. She described me as a manipulative and greedy gold digger who was out to destroy my husband. I didn't respond to any of her charges and just waited for her to finish it. When she seemed to run out of steam, I informed her that everything she accused me of was something she was also guilty of. So, before pointing fingers, she should probably do some introspection. I also informed her that I was relieved that my husband was finally getting rid of freeloaders like her and her other children, who didn't deserve to even breathe the same air as him. Then I hung up and blocked her and my husband's siblings everywhere I could, making it impossible for them to contact me. It's really terrible that individuals will go to such lengths to avoid having to do any work for themselves. I haven't told my husband about his mother calling me yet since I don't want to stress him out any further. But if this happens again, I will absolutely inform him and ensure that they are permanently removed from our lives. They have no right to interrupt our calm in this way. I'm not sure what they'll do next, but I'm confident that my mother-in-law will not stop. Unless we decide to pursue legal action against her or anything. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, because it would be a terrible emotional experience for my spouse. But if it happens, I'm prepared to see that we see it through. They're definitely not fooling with my spouse anymore. Update 5. It's been about 2 weeks since the last update, and a lot has happened since then. After blocking my mother-in-law, my husband and I ate dinner and went to bed, hoping for some peace and quiet the next day. But the next day, my mother-in-law arrived at our house with her 3 grown children, demanding an explanation for all that had been said and done thus far. She looked upset, as did my husband's siblings. I knew this was going to be really stressful for my spouse. Despite their protests, I chose to remain in the room, claiming that I had no right to be there because this was a family matter and I am not a member of the family. I informed them that they were invading my privacy and were standing under my roof, thus they had no right to tell me whether I could stay or not. Then they started angrily abusing my husband, accusing him of being selfish and unreasonable. They even went so far as to accuse him of leaving his family in order to please his wife. My husband had remained silent and was already hot in the face. So I knew it was my cue to take over. My husband is a very sensitive man, especially when it comes to his family and loved ones, so I knew he would be unable to fight them and defend himself against their false charges and manipulation. That was how tender-hearted and caring he was. And while they were only exploiting him for his money, he honestly and deeply loved his family. So I urged him to calm down and told his family to leave since they were upsetting me. More importantly, they were causing my husband to cry. My mother-in-law began arguing with me, stating that I didn't get to push her around, especially at her son's house, and that she could remain as long as she wanted. She didn't stop talking to my husband, even though he seemed unhappy about everything. It was awful to see how little she cared about her own son's sentiments. What mattered most to her was money. So she began telling him that she had not raised him in this manner and was dismayed that he was prioritizing his wife over his own family. His brother even stated that the only role he should be fulfilling was that of a son and brother because I was a gold digger and did not deserve to have a husband like him in the first place. That irritated me, and I lost my composure. At that moment, I snapped at him and told him what I thought of all of them. They were all lazy, good-for-nothing fools who relied exclusively on my husband's kindness and charity because they were unable to provide for themselves. They were basically the definition of gold diggers. Furthermore, not only were they continuously hovering around my husband for money, but they had the audacity to be so ungrateful and target him after everything he'd done for them. They were stunned into silence. I could tell they were struggling to fight back but had nothing to say. Taking advantage of this, I ordered them to go before I reported them to the cops for appearing up unexpectedly and refusing to leave. So they left. But my mother-in-law was still certain that she could persuade my husband to choose them over me. She said that if his father had been living today, he would be disappointed with how their eldest son treated them. I thought it was incredibly nasty and despicable to repeatedly use that card to emotionally manipulate my husband. By the time they drove away, I could tell my spouse was barely holding it together. As soon as they departed, he began sobbing uncontrollably, and I spent hours calming him down. I felt bad about the entire situation and regretted that I hadn't tried to offer my mother-in-law a birthday party in the first place. But then again, that's what opened the can of worms. And I am thankful that this occurred sooner rather than later. Anyway, after his family departed, I banned them everywhere, including his phone and social media, and made sure they couldn't contact us online. After he'd calmed down, I told him it was time to start looking into lawyers. I was confident that this would not be the last we heard from his mother and siblings. He agreed because, as much as he hated to admit it, he knew his family was willing to go to any length to acquire money from him. So we started looking for family lawyers simply to be safe. And we were absolutely right to do so. Within days of the fight, my mother-in-law sent us a legal notice. She asked that he pay them a large sum of money as reparation for taking heaps of money from them after his father's death to establish his business. It appalled me that she and her children were prepared to lie about something so important and disparage my spouse. He'd never accepted a single dollar from his father's estate, instead using money he'd earned himself. He was entirely self-made, and stating such a thing was an affront to his character. I was enraged that they dared to spread such a lie. Because my husband's company is rather large, it sparked a lot of interest, which had an impact on his business as well. That was a stupid move on their behalf. However, after over 2 weeks, we were able to verify that they were lying and that none of their assertions were real. So now they're the ones who must pay us a large sum for attempting to discredit us and threaten my husband's job. Last I heard, my mother-in-law and her children had been shunned by the rest of the family due to their nasty little stunt. All 3 of those lazy bastards are trying to find work so that they can pay the bills that my husband has been handling thus far. I'm pleased this is happening to them because they utterly and completely deserve it. We can now move on from this episode and forget about them completely. My spouse and I are very happy now, and I aim to keep it that way forever. I was kicked out of the house because my sister made up a story about me selling drugs. My parents believed her without any evidence. Growing up, my family placed a huge priority on appearances and achievements. My father, Benjamin, 57 male, works at a prestigious insurance company and is very respected in his area. My mother, Olivia, 56 female, is a biology professor and the ideal caring mother who is always there for us. However, everything in our family came with stipulations. We had to appear and behave flawlessly, and perfect was determined by how well we fulfilled my parents' expectations. My older sister, Isabella, 30 female, or Bella as everyone nicknamed her, embodied their dream. She's an engineer. She's 4 years older than me. She was highly successful and seemed to handle life with ease, constantly gaining praise, honors, and admiration from our parents. On the other hand, I was quieter, more reserved, and a little rebellious. I was intelligent, but I decided to pursue my own way. My hobbies did not always correspond with my parents' expectations of success. Well, I was an English major, which they did not appreciate, but they accepted our disagreements as long as I stayed within their parameters. I attempted to avoid crossing any lines. Regardless of all our differences, I admired Bella. She was everything our parents intended, and I saw her as someone I could rely on and learn from. I never imagined she'd do something like this to me. 6 years ago, my world was turned upside down due to Bella's massive deception. I was 20, still in college, and attempting to plan my future. Bella, our parents' favorite, was the golden kid. She was accomplished, responsible, and always on their good side. Meanwhile, I felt like I'd never measure up, always living in her shadow. Things changed radically for Bella a few months before she told that falsehood. She begged me to assist her in concealing a potentially dangerous situation in which she was involved. Basically, she had made some poor decisions and wanted me to keep my mouth shut about them. She was involved with some questionable persons and situations, which made me uncomfortable and did not sit well with me. She asked me to lie to our parents about it and provide her an alibi. She claimed it was a family duty, and that I owed her because she had always supported me. However, something felt off, and I didn't want to get involved in her plans. I was trying to keep my own life together, and lying for her seemed like a recipe for catastrophe. I told her I wouldn't do it since I didn't want to take any risks. She became enraged, acting as if my refusal was a major betrayal. Her reaction was powerful, almost frightening. I recall her warning that if I crossed her, I would regret it and that she would find a way to hold me accountable. At the time, I assumed it was just theatrics and she would settle down. Looking back, that moment appeared to be the catalyst for everything that followed. Within weeks, Bella began to discreetly undercut me. Soon after, she told our parents a massive falsehood. She told our parents I was selling drugs in college. This was a massive, terrible falsehood that stunned me. I had never used drugs, let alone sold them. But Bella spoke so convincingly that my parents believed her without question. To this day, I don't understand why she did it. We weren't particularly close, but neither were we enemies. I mean, she is or was my sister. I could never have imagined she would do something so wrong to me. This was a falsehood that could damage my future, and I honestly believed it did. My father, Benjamin, responded like a hurricane. He did not ask any questions or allow me to clarify. His rage struck me hard, deeper than I imagined. I sensed his despair and disgust, as if I were no longer his daughter. My mother, Olivia, was quiet, but her silence hurt just as much. She looked at me with tremendous disappointment, as if I had shattered all of her expectations for me. Meanwhile, Bella stood to one side, expressionless. She didn't say anything or acknowledge the chaos she caused. She just watched my folks kick me out. That day, I was thrown out of the house. I had no hope of explaining or understanding what was going on. I left with nothing and had to drop out of college since I couldn't afford it without their help. My future felt like it had vanished overnight. I spent the next few months living with friends, moving from couch to couch and doing whatever work I could find. I felt hopeless. I had big goals, and everything I had worked for was just gone. I tried to contact my parents, thinking they would see the truth. Every call resulted in my being turned away. My father would hang up before I could say anything, and my mother would simply repeat her disparaging statements, refusing to listen or consider them inappropriate. I kept hoping they'd see through Bella's falsehoods and remember who I truly was, but they'd already decided. In their view, I was guilty, and that was it. Years have passed. I gradually learned how to reconstruct my life from scratch. I saved every penny from my waitressing job and then returned to school part-time. It was difficult, but I was determined to show myself that I could build my future without their assistance. Throughout this journey, I met folks who became my chosen family, friends who recognized my genuine self and stood by me after my own family had turned away. They helped me recognize my worth, improved my recovery, and restored my self-esteem. I eventually graduated, obtained a solid job, and began living a life I was proud of. Then I found my ideal fiancé, Mark, 27 million. He was gentle and understanding, everything I had been lacking. When I told him about my family, he didn't criticize or pity me. Instead, he explained that family is more than just blood. I have the right to select who comes into my life. With him, I actually felt loved and accepted. For the first time, I began to believe that I did not require my parents' approval to be complete. As our wedding day approached, thoughts of my family reappeared. I hadn't seen them in 6 years. Part of me wanted to reach out and give them the opportunity to make amends. But every time I thought about it, bitter memories flooded back. Rejection, embarrassment, and how they had discarded me without a second thought. Why should they be a part of one of the happiest days of my life if they were not present at my most difficult times? I received an unexpected message from my father. I was surprised to see his name appear on my phone after all these years. The message was brief and straightforward. He informed me that my mother was seriously ill and wanted to meet me since she missed me. There was no apology or acknowledgement of the past. There is no awareness of the harm they have caused. Just a little word on my mother's illness and her desire to reconnect. He also indicated that he was aware of my approaching wedding and that he and my mother wanted to be involved. It felt weird and weighty to realize they had suddenly longed to reach out. Where was this compassion while I was battling to survive after they abandoned me? They missed my graduation, first job, and pretty much everything else throughout my life. Now when my mother is ill, they act as if those 6 years didn't matter, as if I could just forgive and forget. It appeared so unjust. I may sound selfish, but this caught me off guard, and I didn't feel good about it. They weren't present during the difficult times, but now they wanted to be a part of the happy ones. A rush of emotions overtook me. I felt guilty when I thought about my mother being unwell. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and the thought of her suffering was difficult to bear. I realized that her desire to see me was not solely for the wedding. It could be about seeking closure or making peace before it's too late. But forgiving them felt impossible after everything they had put me through. Abandonment, disbelief, and the difficulties I faced alone. How could I allow them back into my life as if nothing had happened? Following the text, I received several more texts from relatives I had no idea existed. They said that it was terrible of me not to include my parents in my wedding, and that whatever happened recently should not be considered in light of everything they had done for me throughout my life. This definitely got on my nerves. It was hilarious how they came up when I didn't ask my parents to my wedding but couldn't help me when I was almost homeless. I told my fiancé about it, and he immediately told me to ignore my relatives' texts because they were irrelevant. He has informed me that he would support whatever decision I make, but he has also reminded me that my wedding day should be about us being happy and enjoying ourselves, rather than something from the past that hurts and the unresolved feelings that come with it. He advised me to examine what would make me happy in the long run, not just right now. I keep wondering if pushing them away now will merely cause me more anguish. Or will allowing them return make everything worse for me? I'm feeling conflicted. I've worked hard to forge my own path and construct a life without them. Part of me wants to defend it, and I'm afraid that letting them back in will damage everything I've made. But part of me feels bad, especially when my mother's health is a concern. I can't deny that she's attempting to reach out now, even if it feels like it's too late. I keep believing that involving them in the wedding will allow me to finally move on and leave the past behind. But then I remember that they abandoned me based solely on Bella's words, no proof or anything. I'm not sure whether I can just forget about the previous 6 years. My wedding is in a few months, and I am really confused. Should I leave things as they are or let them back in? To be really honest, I'm not sure if I want them back in my life, therefore I need some advice. Aida for not allowing my parents back into my life after they believed my sister's lies and abandoned me. Update 1. It's been a few weeks since I posted. I read a few comments and am happy that most people believe I am not being unreasonable here. Anyway, I still feel like I'm trapped in a whirlwind. I was quite nervous after hearing the news from my father regarding my mother's illness and wanting to visit me. I considered blocking their phone numbers, but I was also concerned that by not giving them a chance, I would come to regret it. Then, surprisingly, my sister Bella reached out. I received an unexpected SMS from her informing me that she had learned of my impending marriage. She added that she knew Mom was sick and wanted to rectify things before it was too late. It seemed like everything had changed in an instant. Bella, the one who had brought me so much pain, was now discussing family and healing. She expressed her longing for me and highlighted the importance of our family's reunion. She explained that I had always been a part of her life and that she wanted us to be at peace. But all I could think of was her betrayal, which had ruined everything. My father's message had already troubled me, and Bella's text simply added to the perplexity. What did she expect of me? Did she truly believe I could forgive her with a few kind words? She refused to apologize or acknowledge the issues she caused. Instead, she continued emphasizing how family was the most essential thing, especially since Mom's health was diminishing. It all felt false, as if she was only reaching out now to relieve her guilt. I couldn't help but wonder if there was another motive for her message, one that I wasn't perceiving. She had been cold and calculating when she lied about me, and I couldn't get the impression that it was all about her image. The prospect of seeing Bella after so many years was like revisiting an old sore. Still, the fact that my mother was ill made me feel differently. I felt awful for wanting to keep them out when there was a chance she wanted to make amends. But every time I considered forgiving them, every memory from the past came flooding back even stronger. I wondered if they'd ever acknowledge the troubles they produced for me. The idea of them attending my wedding felt almost ludicrous, as if they could simply show up as proud parents after all this time. I continued thinking about my fiancé's recommendation to prioritize my long-term happiness. My wedding should be a joyful celebration, not a source of stress. But how could I find peace if I was still angry? Could I truly move on if I never allowed them back into my life? I couldn't see Bella sitting in the front row like nothing had happened. It felt awful to even consider including them after what they had done. I decided to respond to Bella, but I kept it quick. I told her I needed some time to consider and didn't know how I felt about her or our parents attending the wedding. I remarked that I was unsure how I felt about them after everything that had happened between us. I'm not sure why, but I hoped she understood. However, her response was simply another message about family, with no indication of regret or acknowledgement of her conduct. She even had the audacity to declare that she understood my emotions but hoped I would see the larger picture and let the past go for Mom's sake. After her response, I was more perplexed than ever. I thought having time to dwell on my emotions would help, but it actually made things worse. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years began to contact me, encouraging me to let go of my anger and warning me that if I didn't reunite with my family soon, I'd regret it. They seemed to only know a portion of the tale and believed I was being unfair. Their words hurt, but I realized they had no idea what I had gone through. This simply increased my uncertainty and fury. A few days later, my dad sent me another mail with further information concerning Mom's condition. He didn't give much information, but it was evident she wasn't doing well. He said Mom had always loved me and wanted us to be a family again. It felt weird, as if he was attempting to make me feel guilty rather than apologizing or acknowledging my grief. I questioned whether he comprehended the consequences of their actions. I spent several hours considering what I would say if I met them again. I imagined telling them about the years of struggle, the nights spent feeling completely alone, and the betrayal I still held. But deep inside, I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd probably find a way to excuse their actions or reject my emotions, claiming I was being exaggerated. Still, the notion of my mother being ill weighed on me. Was I wrong to hold on to my rage when she could be facing significant consequences? My fiancé has been an excellent source of support, reminding me that my sentiments are valid and that I can establish my own boundaries. He pledged to stand by me regardless of what I decided. I consider myself fortunate to have someone who actually understands my suffering and does not encourage me to forgive solely for the sake of appearances. He underlined that it is my decision, but I can feel the weight of it all. As the wedding date approaches, the pressure builds. I'm torn between wanting to let my parents and Bella back into my life for some peace and shielding myself from further pain. My mother's condition complicates matters even further. I'm worried that if I don't let them back in now, I'll regret it later. However, I'm concerned that opening the door would result in even more heartache. Bella's letter keeps replaying in my head, making me question whether I'm being too harsh. But then I realize that she never expressed regret or acknowledged the harm she caused. How can I move forward when the past still feels so fresh? I'm left wondering if forgiving them will actually help me recover or simply reopen old scars. My wedding should be a pleasant moment, but it is currently marred with unresolved feelings. I'm at a stage where I'm not sure if bringing them back in will offer me any closure or simply more pain. So here I am, still hesitant and contemplating. Is inviting them back into my life the right decision, or am I setting myself up for disappointment? Update 2. Hey, it has been roughly 3 weeks since my last post. A few days after the previous update, I reached my limit and went to see my family. After weeks of putting it off, I couldn't ignore my mother's critical illness. Part of me wanted to keep my distance, but I felt guilty, and I knew I'd regret not seeing her one more time if she didn't improve. It was an hour-long drive to their place, and it was difficult to remain calm. But I kept telling myself I was doing this for my mother, not for Dad or Bella. But that didn't make things any simpler. I was frightened to see the house again. I have so many memories there. I had lived in that house for my entire life until 6 years ago. I was forced to go, and now I feel compelled to return. When I got to the house, it felt odd. It had been so long, but everything seemed practically the same. To my astonishment, my mother was the only one present, seated in a chair near the window. I barely recognized her. My father had not arrived yet, which was somewhat of a relief. But I knew the confrontation was still imminent. It pained my heart to see her so weak and fatigued. She appeared so small, and I just wanted to hug and cry. I could only think about how much time had been lost. We could have spent a lot of time together. If Bella hadn't pulled that stunt, I wouldn't have been as stunned by Mom's situation. If I had been by her side all those years, I would have been able to aid her in some manner. My older sister, however, denied me this opportunity. Mom looked both thrilled and sad to see me. For the first time in my life, I didn't perceive my mother as the authoritative figure I strove so hard to impress. She was merely a mother. A human who had made mistakes. She sincerely apologized. She was pretty clear that she regretted not reaching out to me. She explained that she had not contacted out in all these years because she was humiliated. She stated that by the time she discovered Bella had lied, it was too late, and she assumed I would never forgive her. She also mentioned that she had considered reaching out to me several times. She penned several letters that she never sent. She apologized multiple times. Hearing her articulate it made me feel both sad and relieved. There was no discussion of family obligations or expectations. There was no compulsion to forgive her or forget what happened. She simply accepted responsibility for her mistakes and apologized. It was too much to take in. A part of me wanted to shout and tell her how difficult it was for me. But I couldn't. I just hugged her and told her it was fine. I truly forgave her. It was as if I never got furious at her. She was simply left with regret, and I didn't want to make matters worse. I only wanted to be by her side. My father walked in, and the atmosphere immediately altered. He entered with confidence, as if he had done nothing wrong. He did not apologize or acknowledge the anguish he had caused me. Instead, he dismissed my feelings as insignificant, advising that I move on for the sake of the family. He appeared to believe he was the victim since I had withdrawn myself for so long. He completely missed my mother's point of view. I tried to remain calm, but rage rose within me. When I conveyed how hurt I was by everything that had happened and how I had made ends meet over the last 6 years, he disregarded it with phrases like, "Oh, we thought we were doing what was best for the family." He refused to accept responsibility for his acts and kept shifting the focus, making it appear as if I was to blame for not contacting them throughout the years. My mother looked concerned, but she remained silent. Perhaps she was tired of Dad and our never-ending disputes. My father persisted in his efforts to persuade me that my decision to stay away was wrong. It was frustrating, and I had a familiar sense of impotence from my childhood. As if my voice didn't matter. When I asked about Isabella and where she was, they replied she couldn't make it. It was strange because she had reached out, mentioning family and forgiveness, but when it came time to confront the matter, she was missing. Deep down, I wasn't really surprised. I assumed she would avoid any serious disagreement, even if she was the one who began it. She had caused the commotion and left everyone else to deal with it. After the visit, I was fatigued. Instead of the tranquility I desired, I sat silently as my father lectured me, hoping he could persuade me to forgive them. However, I understood I didn't need his approval and didn't have to fit in with a family that had previously let me down so readily. Before I departed, my mother requested that I return soon. She sounded desperate and appeared sorrowful. I wasn't sure if I'd be back, but I couldn't say goodbye forever. I hugged her and promised to keep in touch, encouraging her to contact me whenever she wanted or needed to. I couldn't think straight on the journey back to my place. I felt conflicted. My mother's apology was genuine and meant more to me than I realized, but my father's attitude and Isabella's absence made me bitter, bringing back the anguish I had tried to ignore. I wanted to forgive them and go on, but I wasn't sure how to do so without losing my mind. I forgive Mom. I don't have anything against her anymore. But what about Dad and Bella? I'm not quite sure about them. My wedding is in a month, and I'm not sure whether I'll invite them or keep them in my life. I'm confident I'll stay in touch with Mom. I might invite her. However, as I already stated, I am unsure about Dad and Bella. Perhaps it is best to go without them, maintaining a safe distance for my own peace of mind. It is difficult, especially since my mother may not have much time left. I feel a mix of remorse, hatred, and love, and I'm not sure whether I'll ever get the closure I desire. I honestly am not sure what my next step will be. I'll keep you updated if anything happens. Update 3. Hello everyone, it has been a long time since I provided an update. It has been 6 months, and so much has transpired. I would have provided an update sooner, but I simply wanted to comprehend everything. Mark and I had a small private wedding. After everything with my family, we wanted a quiet day focused on us. I decided to invite my mother and father. My mother was quite ill, and I knew I'd be disappointed if she couldn't go. It was easy to invite her because she had made an effort with me, and everything was well. She admitted her mistakes, and I could tell she really wished things had been different. I decided not to invite Bella. It wasn't to hurt her, I just couldn't trust her not to cause additional turmoil. Bella texted me after the ceremony, furious about not being included. I simply informed her I didn't want her there and blocked her number. That seemed like a relief, like if I had completed a hard chapter. Unfortunately, approximately 2 months after the wedding, my mother died. She wasn't in pain. She died quietly, with me and Dad by her side. I was grateful for the time I spent with her, even though it was brief. In her final days, she appeared softer and more like the mother I knew. We would sometimes sit in silence, which felt comforting. I was able to say farewell, something I will always appreciate. My mom's funeral was one of the most difficult days of my life. It was a casual gathering of relatives and a few close friends. I wanted to recognize and celebrate her life. Bella was also invited, but we assumed she would not go because she had never contacted us following Mom's death. But on the day of the funeral, she stormed in, demanding to know why she wasn't at the wedding and making everything about her. It became chaotic. Her ranting drowned out the lovely things expressed about my mother. I felt both humiliated and hurt. Dad had reached his limit. He was already struggling after losing his mother. My parents were high school sweethearts. They'd been together for nearly 40 years, and this was plainly the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Bella's selfishness sent him over the edge. He rose up and instructed her to go. He stated that she was insulting Mom's memory and that he never wanted to see her again. The room was fraught with anxiety. Everyone was stunned into silence. I had conflicting feelings. Part of me was happy that Dad had finally faced her, but I was also concerned about the implications. Bella rushed out, complaining about how unfair it was, but I felt it was necessary to save the day from her antics. It felt like a watershed moment for both my father and me. Even though we were not particularly close, we felt that Mom deserved better than a raucous burial. Strangely, this incident brought my father and me closer. Our relationship isn't terrific, and there is certainly some stress, but we've managed to remain civil. He hasn't apologized for his part in everything, but he is now respecting my boundaries and has expressed a desire to have me in his life. We may not be close, but it is tranquil, which is enough for now. Baby steps, I suppose. Being in the position I am in right now feels strange. I used to think I needed a great moment of forgiveness, but now I realize I just needed to let go. Losing my mother was difficult, but it brought me closure. I can keep the pleasant memories of her and leave the rest behind. I do not intend to reconnect with Bella. I've realized that not everyone knows how the difficulties they create can affect others, which is good. I don't need her in my life anymore. Now I'm focusing on my relationship with Mark and creating something positive with him. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone for their support throughout this difficult period. Your warm comments and understanding have meant a lot to me. Sharing my tale has been a relief, and knowing that others care has helped. I appreciate everyone who read my updates and shared their feedback. It really helps to know that I am not alone on this journey. Thank you for being there for me. My mother-in-law constantly demanded money and used my wife for support. My wife defended her, even when she stole from us. My relationship with my wife, Carol, and her mother Eleanor, has been worsening for years. It's a sluggish, grinding problem, the kind that eats away at you gradually. It's reached a breaking point, and I'm not sure what the next move should be. It all comes down to Eleanor's almost infinite feeling of entitlement and Carol's complete inability to confront it, or even accept it, really. To understand the dynamic, some background is required. Carol and I met at a business event around 6 years ago, through a mutual friend. I enjoyed how she was instantly candid and honest about her family's financial history. She mentioned that her family was previously immensely affluent. They had a large house in an elite neighborhood, several costly automobiles, and a lifestyle that frankly, I couldn't understand. But, according to Carol, a succession of catastrophic investments, along with constantly terrible financial decisions, caused them to lose practically everything. She referred to her parents, Eleanor and Richard, as having lavish tastes. They'd buy things they couldn't afford, boats, sports cars, and take out loans they couldn't possibly repay. This debt cycle persisted, she claimed, until they were forced to sell their mansion and relocate to a much smaller condo. Despite this, Carol insisted that her parents had done their best. She insisted they had given her all she could possibly want. However, the story she told me over time showed a very different reality, one that made it difficult for me to connect with her parents. My wife's 17th birthday incident was especially telling. Carol had received a large sum of money as gifts from several family members. Carol claims Eleanor pressured her into turning her the money. She used guilt, claiming that she needed the money more than Carol did, and that Carol did not comprehend the demands of running a household. Carol then learned that Eleanor had used the money to have a professional perm. When Carol, naturally outraged, approached her mother, Eleanor's response was chillingly nasty. She informed Carol that she had always supplied food, shelter, and clothing for her and thus was entitled to the money. Carol's father, Richard, was, in many ways, worse. He had a child outside of his marriage to Eleanor and was legally required to pay child support. However, when Carol started her first job, Richard began asking that she contribute to these payments. He'd constantly pressure her, stating he couldn't afford it and that she needed to support the family. He would also frequently urge Carol to buy him stuff for their condo, a new, larger television, a cutting-edge refrigerator, even if the ones they already had were perfectly adequate. If Carol ever rejected or hesitated, Richard appeared to become hostile. He'd threatened to shatter her phone and laptop, the few things she owned that were genuinely hers. Carol recounted to me these anecdotes with detached grief, as if she had long ago accepted this conduct as usual. Only after she moved out of her parents' condo and into her own little apartment did she feel truly independent, with authority over her own life. My upbringing was the total opposite. My parents, John and Mary, were the salt of the earth. We were not impoverished, but neither were we wealthy. We lived in a modest working-class neighborhood. Dad worked as a mechanic at a neighborhood garage for more than 30 years. Mom worked in a bakery down the street, baking donuts and pastries. They worked so hard to provide for me. They scrimped and saved to ensure that I had all I required for school. They never complained. Never made me feel like a burden. Years later, once I finished college and found a respectable career, I was able to save a large sum of money. My biggest dream, which I had for years, was to buy a house for my parents. A tiny, comfortable home in a quiet area. It was a long-time fantasy that they had never imagined could come true. When I eventually did it, and handed them the keys, my father attempted to refuse. He stated that was too costly and I shouldn't spend my money on them. It took a lot of convincing and earnest pleading before he ultimately agreed. Both were in tears. It was one of the happiest days of my life. After that, they never requested anything from me, despite the fact that I offered to aid them financially on a regular basis. They both took on part-time jobs to keep themselves busy and earn some extra money. They emphasized, with quiet dignity, that parents should care for their children, not the other way around. So you can imagine the culture shock I felt when I first met Carol's folks. It felt like I had entered an entirely new universe. The first experience with Eleanor was unsettling. We were in a restaurant. Carol had planned a meal for us to meet. Eleanor looked me up and down, and her first inquiry was, "So, are you wealthy?" "No, hello. It's good to meet you," just a direct, blunt question regarding my financial situation. I stuttered about having steady work and making a decent living. Following our initial meeting, Eleanor made it her mission to understand everything she could about my money. She'd ask probing questions that always led back to money. She asked about my insurance plans, financial portfolio, and retirement savings. It was really intrusive, and it made me very uncomfortable. I voiced my worries to Carol, who, to her credit, spoke with her mother. She asked Eleanor to stop. But Eleanor merely changed her approach. She began asking similar questions when Carol was not around, cornering me at family gatherings or calling me personally. One particularly noteworthy occasion came when I casually announced that I had paid off all of my student loans. Eleanor's eyes brightened up. She instantly started into a diatribe about how I should help Carol pay off her bills. Because I was in such a great situation, I had a responsibility to help her. We were just dating at the time. It was an extremely inappropriate suggestion, and it made me feel like I was being treated like a walking ATM. I finally, firmly, told Eleanor that I was uncomfortable discussing my personal money with her and that I would prefer it if she respected my limits. Carol received continuous demands for money. Eleanor would phone Carol several times a week, often more than once a day, to ask for money. The quantities varied, but they were all significant. $1,000 here, $500 there. The pattern was consistently the same. Eleanor would call, often in tears, claiming to have an urgent need, a medical bill, a car repair, a sudden unanticipated expense. Carol, ever the obedient daughter, would express worry while explaining that she was attempting to conserve money. That she couldn't simply keep handing over enormous amounts of money. Eleanor would then embark on a guilt trip. Carol was reminded of all the sacrifices she has made for her. I promised to pay her back. Of course, the payments never arrived. If Carol ventured to bring up the remaining obligations, Eleanor would be furious. She would yell at Carol. Accuse her of being ungrateful, selfish. She didn't appreciate anything her parents had done for her. Then, a few hours later, or perhaps the next day, she'd phone back, crying. I apologized profusely. She claimed to have been really stressed. The cycle would then unavoidably repeat itself a few days later. Another telephone call. Another urgent request for funds. Carol would talk to me about these experiences for hours on end. She'd describe the calls in great detail. But, and this was the most difficult part, if I ever expressed agreement or ventured to condemn Eleanor's actions, Carol would immediately turn against me. She'd snap at me, saying she could complain about her mother while I couldn't. That I did not comprehend their family dynamics. That I had no idea what Eleanor had gone through. It was an infuriating, nonsensical protection mechanism. I eventually got to the point where I couldn't listen to it any longer. I told Carol, as gently as possible, that I loved her but could no longer be her sounding board for these concerns. It was extremely exhausting, and it was straining our relationship. When Carol and I decided to marry, finances, understandably, became a big bone of dispute. Carol desired a lavish wedding. I agreed to pay for it. I had saved diligently and could afford it. However, I also insisted on a prenuptial agreement. It was not a lack of trust in Carol. It was about practicalities. I had seen personally her family's financial turmoil, and I wanted to protect myself by ensuring that our marriage began on a stable, financially secure basis. Carol's reaction was intense. She was highly offended, accusing me of not trusting her and of treating our marriage as a business transaction. She threatened to cancel the wedding totally. She stated that a marriage should be based on love and trust, not formal documents and financial calculations. Eleanor, of course, intervened, escalating Carol's fury. She called me and chastised me for even contemplating a prenup. They told me that their family possessed honor and integrity. I didn't have anything to worry about. During this conversation, I lost my patience. I explained to them, quite forcefully, that Eleanor had a lengthy history of borrowing money from Carol and never repaying it. Her claim to familial honor seemed extremely empty. Both Carol and Eleanor were outraged. Carol packed her bags and departed. She moved out of our apartment, claiming that I had insulted her family, that I did not love her. I was devastated. I tried constantly to convey that my purpose was not to doubt her loyalty or commitment, but only to protect our shared interests. To guarantee that we came into our marriage with clear eyes and expectations, free of any potential asset conflicts. She would not listen. A week later, she arrived at my door uninvited. She was crying and begged me to take her back. She said she'd made a terrible mistake. She told me that Eleanor and Richard had asked that she start giving them her wages so they could manage her finances more effectively. It was then, she claimed, that she realized the magnitude of their manipulation. She agreed to the prenup. So we reconciled, and the wedding planning proceeded. The wedding itself was an experience. We had no option but to invite Eleanor and Richard. It was essential to Carol, and I wanted to make her happy. However, their attendance, as well as their reaction to the wedding's size, constituted a watershed moment. They were visibly surprised by how well the event went. Following the wedding, Eleanor's money requests, which had previously been focused mostly at Carol, began to come directly to me. She would phone me, sometimes many times a week, and ask me to purchase her items. She'd ask me to pay for services she used, such as hair appointments, dry cleaning, and shopping expenditures. She'd sometimes just ask for cash without explaining why. I continually tried to convey to her that I was not required to pay for these items. That I wasn't her personal bank account. But she would persist, using guilt, deception, and plain begging to wear me down. She would say she was elderly and fragile. She has no one else to turn to. That as Carol's spouse, I had an obligation to assist her. I caved a couple times early on just to keep the peace. I persuaded myself I could afford it and it wasn't worth the fight. The refrigerator incident was an excellent illustration. Eleanor contacted me unexpectedly and requested that I buy her a new refrigerator. She stated her current one was outdated and unattractive, and she wanted a new stainless steel model with all of the latest features. I pointed out, properly, that her current refrigerator was fully functional. There was no real need for a new one. I questioned why she wasn't approaching Carol or Richard for the money. Her response was irritating. She mentioned that I had a high income. Because I was wealthy, I should be accountable for funding some of her bills. I adamantly rejected it. Eleanor began to cry, screaming into her phone. She told me how disappointed she was in me. How I was failing to fulfill my duty as a husband to my wife. She then called Carol and, using the same manipulative tactics, persuaded her that if I didn't purchase her the refrigerator, Carol would. Carol, who earned substantially less than me, would have to go into her personal resources to fulfill her mother's whim. I eventually relented. I got Eleanor a refrigerator just to shut her up. Then there was the issue with the sweaters. My parents, bless their hearts, had ordered identical sweaters for Carol and myself as an anniversary present. They were hand-knitted with a unique design that my father had helped construct. My father, overjoyed with the present, had texted me images of the sweaters before they were shipped. When the box arrived, I carefully stored it in the garage, planning to surprise Carol on our anniversary. On the day of our anniversary, I went to the garage to get the package. It was gone. I looked everywhere and turned the garage upside down, but it was nowhere to be found. I asked Carol whether she'd seen it, if she'd accidentally thrown it away thinking it was junk mail. She had not. The parcel has simply disappeared? It was puzzling. A month later, I visited Eleanor and Richard at their condo, and the sweaters were hanging in their closet. My parents had sent us hand-knitted monogram sweaters with love. I confronted Eleanor, my rage scarcely restrained. She originally denied this. Then she claimed she found the package outside, near our trash cans. After further inquiry, she acknowledged being at our house, looking about in the garage, and seeing the package. She stated she assumed I threw it away. That it was unwelcome. So she had taken it. It was an outright falsehood. An obvious case of theft. I was infuriated. I stated unequivocally that she had no authority to search our possessions. That she stole from us. Her response was astounding. She scoffed, claiming the sweaters were cheap and poorly made. She had actually done me a favor by taking them. She said I should be thankful. I informed her that they were a present from my parents. That they possessed sentimental worth. It did not matter. She just didn't understand it. I took the sweatshirts back. Carol and I departed immediately. On the way home, I anticipated Carol to be as upset as I was. Instead, she defended her mother. She believed Eleanor had simply made a mistake. That I had overreacted. That I had embarrassed her. She said Eleanor had not intended any harm. She was probably bewildered. I could not believe it. Even after Eleanor had been caught red-handed stealing from us, Carol continued to make excuses for her. Then Eleanor called Carol and demanded that she purchase a new dishwasher. It was a totally unneeded expense. Their home consisted of only 2 people. Richard and his buddies spend the majority of their evenings drinking at the local tavern. Carol attempted to reason with her, highlighting the absurdity of the request. But Eleanor insisted. She mentioned that all of their neighbors had dishwashers. She felt ashamed to be the only one on her floor without one. When Carol continued to refuse, Eleanor informed her she wished she hadn't been born. That any other child would be grateful to have such a giving mother. Carol was selfish and ungrateful. Carol was devastated. She spent the remainder of the evening in tears. I had stopped speaking to Eleanor immediately following the sweater incident. But the next day, I got a text from her. She suggested that I step up and support Carol, that I should purchase the dishwasher for her. She had just emotionally attacked her daughter, and now she was asking that I pay for the object that started the whole thing. I ignored the message. I just couldn't engage. I showed Carol the text as, I don't know, proof of her mother's actions. Carol's reply was unfortunately inevitable. She informed me that she had already spent a substantial chunk of her savings to order the dishwasher for Eleanor. She claimed she couldn't bear hearing her mother so angry. Richard's death a few months later was heartbreaking, but it also introduced new challenges. He was discovered lifeless on a street near their unit following a night of heavy drinking. It was an unexpected and shocking loss. Eleanor was naturally devastated. However, the situation suddenly became even more challenging. Richard had accumulated a substantial amount of debt, including loans from shady persons. Loan sharks, essentially. Eleanor was presented with a mound of invoices and threats of harm if she did not pay. She had to sell nearly everything they owned to pay off Richard's debts. She was left with almost nothing. Carol and I considered it, and despite the history and troubles, we decided to take Eleanor in. She had nowhere else to go. It felt right. The humane thing to do. I wondered if this was a chance for a fresh start. Perhaps with Richard gone and Eleanor in a more vulnerable position, she will be more reasonable. I greeted her warmly and made every effort to make her feel at ease. But I noticed Eleanor looking through our possessions. When we left the house, or just in another room, she would rummage through drawers, closets, and boxes. It wasn't obvious, she was cautious. However, I would discover things somewhat out of order. Drawers are not entirely closed, boxes have moved. I challenged her about this multiple times. Every time, she'd make the same lame reason. She was simply inquisitive. She was only glancing around. I requested Carol to speak with her. To define some boundaries. Carol's response was consistently the same. Just let it go. She's going through a hard time. However, it felt like a perpetual invasion of privacy. Then everything started to disappear. Initially, the pieces were small. An ornamental vase. A set of coasters. A few books. Then more valuable stuff started to disappear. Carol's jewelry was in pieces. Strangely, whenever these items went missing, Eleanor would come home from her outings carrying shopping bags. Filled with new clothing, new shoes, new accessories. Given her financial circumstances, she had no income. It became increasingly clear that she was selling our belongings to fund her buying spree. She had gathered completely new clothing. Filled with beautiful gowns and matching heels. Despite not having a discernible source of revenue. I pointed this out to Carol as gently as possible. I voiced my growing suspicions that Eleanor was taking from us. Carol dismissed my concerns. She told me not to focus on her mother. She deserved to reward herself after all she'd been through. I didn't mind Eleanor treating herself in principle. But not using our money? Not by selling our possessions. It was theft. Plain and simple. The incident with my wallet was the final straw. I got home from work early one afternoon. Carol was still in her office. I went to our bedroom to take a shower, as is my custom. When I got out of the shower, I discovered Eleanor standing in our bedroom. Near my dresser. She held my wallet in her hand. And she was going through it. I was shocked and speechless for a moment. I yelled at her and demanded to know what she was doing. Why was she in our bedroom? Why was she going through my wallet? She turned bright red and stammered, unable to provide a coherent response. She resembled a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. I later told Carol about the incident. I expected her to be equally outraged as I was. To finally recognize her mother's actions for what they were. Instead, she minimized it. She assumed Eleanor simply needed some money. That it wasn't a huge problem. She even offered that Eleanor could steal money from my wallet if she needed it. That I need to be more understanding. She accused me of looking down on her family. Of condemning them because they were not as wealthy as I was. She said that her family did not grow up in poverty and desperation like mine had. This implies that my upbringing has made me less understanding. That comment stung. It was a low strike that exposed a deep-seated resentment I had not recognized existed. I decided that I needed some space. I went on a walk. A long, aimless walk, attempting to make sense of Carol's response. I could not understand her steadfast devotion to her mother. Even when Eleanor was obviously in the wrong. Even when she stole from us. Carol apologized when I returned home a few hours later. She said she had a firm conversation with Eleanor, telling her not to enter our bedroom again. Not to go through our possessions. I just nodded. I didn't believe it would make a difference. Eleanor has repeatedly demonstrated that she had no regard for boundaries. No consideration for our property. And I was correct. It did not cease. I made precautions to protect my belongings. I added locks to my dresser drawers. On the cabinets in the living room. On the storage crates in the garage. It felt silly to lock away my own belongings in my own home. But it was the only way I could feel any sense of security. Then I arrived yesterday. The result of months of frustration. Of feeling abused and degraded. Carol called me at work, frantic. She had gone home for lunch, as she often did, to check on Eleanor. But Eleanor was gone. Not just out for a walk or a shopping expedition. Her belongings were also gone. Her clothing. Her personal effects. It's all gone. Carol, understandably worried, began looking around the house. Trying to figure out what happened. And that's when she made her discovery. Her credit card, which she always carried in her wallet, was missing. A considerable percentage of her jewelry, including precious antiques, was also gone. Eleanor didn't answer her phone. Carol was frightened that Eleanor would use her credit card. That she would pawn the jewelry. She begged me for aid. My instant response, the only rational one in my mind, was to call the cops. Report Eleanor's activities as theft. Carol reacted angrily. She claimed she couldn't possibly denounce her own mother to the police. That was unimaginable. She accuses me of being unhelpful. Of not caring about her emotions. And that is where I am currently. And, I'm just exhausted. Drained. I feel like I'm constantly up against Eleanor's entitlement and Carol's supporting conduct. I advised calling the police because that is what happens when someone takes from you. It's the logical and reasonable path of action. But Carol considers it a betrayal. So, AITA? Am I wrong to advise that we involve the police? Isn't that the usual protocol in such cases? I honestly don't know what else to do. Update 1. The response has been tremendous, to say the least. I sincerely appreciate your support. And I didn't expect so many people to weigh in. Many of you have pointed out Carol's troubling behavior. And honestly, I see it too. I do. The reality is, we rarely encounter problems. It occurs virtually exclusively when Eleanor is present. It's becoming evident that I need to have a serious discussion with Carol about this situation. As long as Eleanor is a constant presence in our life, this pattern of boundary violations and Carol's inability to enforce them will unavoidably continue. Update 2. I had that chat with Carol. I even showed her this post, hoping that an outside perspective would be helpful. It did not go well. She is really upset, alleging that the comments are unjust and judgmental. She grew highly defensive, claiming that anyone would support their parent regardless of the circumstances. She also felt betrayed since I had shared such a private topic online. I tried to clarify that my objective was only to determine whether contacting the police was the best line of action. But she didn't respond. She's fully blaming me, and I'm not sure why she can't understand Eleanor's role in all of this. Update 3. After a week, Carol finally received communication from Eleanor. It turns out that Eleanor pawned part of the stolen jewels. She claims to crave independence. That she is tired of living with us because she feels restrained in her actions. Carol threatened to contact the police if the remaining jewelry was not returned. But Eleanor appears completely unfazed. Carol is now urging me to interfere. To talk with Eleanor. To try to reason with her. I strongly informed Carol that I would be staying out of it. To my surprise, Carol has now blamed me for Eleanor's leaving, claiming I made her feel unwelcome. I'm actually speechless at this moment. Update 4. After some time, I took the painful decision to file for divorce. Many of you undoubtedly expected this conclusion, and I must admit that I wish I had recognized the necessity sooner. Carol was able to block the credit card after Eleanor stole her possessions. However, the retrieval of the valuables proved difficult. I reaffirmed my suggestion to involve law enforcement, but she flatly refused. She then had the arrogance to ask me to replace the stolen jewelry. What's her reasoning? Eleanor took it, and I allegedly made Eleanor feel uncomfortable, thus it was my job to acquire replacement jewelry. All because she refused to contact the cops. I flatly refused? I informed her I had finished. With her. With her family. With the overall toxic condition, a heated dispute ensued, during which she made some extremely cruel remarks about my parents. I told her to go. She was extremely upset and accused me of being unjust. I told her to pack her items. And she departed, cursing me, and went to dwell with Eleanor. Update 5. Since Carol's departure, she and Eleanor have been constantly contacting me. Carol even contacted my parents. Thankfully, my parents are not like hers. Carol was told by my mother that she trusted my judgment even if she did not know all of the details. It has been a huge relief to have their support. I haven't told them the complete tale yet, but I plan to. I'm meeting with a lawyer today to discuss the divorce proceedings. I've already followed some of your advice and changed the locks. I have also bought security cameras, which I will install this week. I'm not sure if Eleanor or Carol will try anything, but I think it's important to be prepared. Update 6. Eleanor was detained as the situation developed over the course of 2 months. She had been stalking people. Arriving at my employment. When I went out with buddies. It was quite stressful. On one occasion, she hurled a drink at me, spoiling an otherwise nice shirt. I tried to be cordial, but her conduct only got worse. She started showing up at my residence, even threw pebbles at my windows. Today, she crossed a line. She broke my bedroom window. I phoned the cops. I had no other option. I simply could not take it any longer. Carol is predictably enraged. She maintains that I should have handled the situation quietly. Eleanor is going through a difficult time. I did laugh. I informed her that Eleanor deserved the repercussions of her behavior. Carol has now demanded that I forgive Eleanor. After everything. The stalking. The harassment. Property damage. Forgiveness is not an option. I finally told my parents the whole nature of the problem. They were startled that I hadn't informed them sooner. And they completely support my decision to proceed with the divorce. I warned them to be cautious, although I doubt Eleanor or Carol will target their property given the distance. Carol eventually bailed Eleanor out of jail. I made it clear to Carol that she was responsible for covering the expense of the window repair. Alternatively, I would seek legal action. She and Eleanor eventually agreed to pay for the damages. Final update. The divorce is final, it is officially over, and it feels extremely liberated. It's as if a weight has been lifted, and I can now breathe freely. My now ex-wife attempted to obtain spousal maintenance and made a move for my assets. However, the prenuptial agreement fulfilled its goal. It shielded me. She argued. She pleaded. However, her efforts proved useless. Anyone thinking about getting married should strongly consider a prenuptial agreement. It may be an awkward topic, but it is very necessary. It requires planning and preparedness. That brings this chapter of my life to a close. I spent 5 years being a devoted stepfather, but my wife's child constantly disrespected me, insisting that I was nothing to him. You are nothing to me. You are nobody. So when it came to paying for college, I urged him to let his true father pay for it. I never expected to share my tale, but I needed to get it off my chest. My name is Robert, and I'm 45 years old. I operate a highly successful elite wine bar in town that I constructed entirely from scratch and am really proud of. That pub introduced me to someone 5 years ago, or so I thought at the time. Melissa was a bookkeeper I recruited to assist with the financial aspects of my firm. She was intelligent, efficient, and exuded a subtle elegance that captivated me. She was more than just adept at her profession, she had a lovely personality. Something that made spending late nights reviewing financial reports a little less tiresome. At first, we kept it professional. She was new to the team, and I didn't want to overstep. But as the weeks progressed, I found myself staying in her office a little bit longer, making excuses to check on her work, just to be near her. Finally, I made the first move. "Let me take you to dinner," I said one evening after we had done studying the books. She hesitated briefly before smiling. "Are you asking as my boss or as a man?" "As a man." That supper led to another and another. And before I knew it, we were discussing our future together. Everything looked amazing. Melissa was attentive. Her kid, Ethan, was nice and courteous. And I felt as if I had finally discovered the family I'd always desired. We got married after 1 year of dating, and Melissa and Ethan moved into my house. At first, things went smoothly. I basically jumped right into being the greatest stepfather I could be. I accompanied Ethan to sporting events, assisted him with school tasks, and ensured he had all he required. I paid for family vacations, bought him all of the latest sneakers he desired, and did everything I could to provide him with the life I hoped I had when I was younger. He would see his father from time to time. To be honest, knowing what I did in the past did not make me feel completely at ease. According to what I knew, Kevin had virtually burned down their old flat several times while drunk. This is why he lost custody in the first place. But Melissa urged that Ethan retain that connection. "He's still his father," she would remark when I expressed my concerns. "Ethan needs to know his dad still cares about him. I saw him at a school event once, and he didn't appear sober. There was something about the way he swayed while standing still. His eyes were unable to focus. But I kept my mouth quiet. After all, who am I to interfere? I was only the stepfather, correct? God, I wish I had known then what I know now. If only I had known then that my desire to be the ideal stepfather could have blinded me to what was really going on. But hindsight is 20/20, right? And the real crisis hadn't even started, not even close. Time went by, and Ethan turned 18 years old. Both his birthday and graduation were approaching. And this made him walk around the house like a frightened wreck. He constantly said, "What if something goes wrong? What if people don't come? What if this isn't perfect?" One evening, when I noticed him overthinking, I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Hey, everything is fine," I said to him. "As a matter of fact, I've got a brilliant idea. Why don't we hold your party at the bar? We can reserve the best section in the house." His eyes immediately brightened up. I knew my wine bar had become a popular destination in town. And Ethan had been eager to show it off to his friends. "Really?" he asked, already reaching for his phone. "Oh my God, my Instagram is going to be insane. Everyone at school is going to be so jealous." I threw myself into preparations. I wanted things to be perfect for him. I even brought him shopping for a designer suit, a sleek black one that made him look like a junior businessman. He looked every bit the young professional in the suit. I nodded, indicating my approval. "How many guests do you think you're going to invite?" I inquired one evening as we were discussing the details. He fiddled with his phone for a time, appearing to hesitate. "About 30 people." "Great. Can you send me a guest list so that I can make sure we have enough space and food for everyone?" "Oh, I don't really have one yet," he replied swiftly. "Just plan for 30, okay?" In retrospect, I wish I had advocated for the list. But I was so focused on getting everything ready. The tables were set. The light was golden and pleasant. The atmosphere at Upper West Wine Bar was nothing short of ideal. It had been converted into the perfect location for an 18-year-old's birthday, sophisticated yet youthful, with a carefully curated menu of virgin cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. Ethan looked great in his cut black suit, standing alongside a group of his pals, laughing and taking photos. Melissa's family was present, socializing with his classmates, and everything appeared to be going perfectly. Then he walked in. I recognized Kevin even before he spoke. He swayed unevenly with each step, his eyes hazy. He wasn't sober. "I'm here to wish my son a happy birthday," he exclaimed loudly, catching the attention of the attendees. I was sitting next to Ethan when his father came over to our table, his expression filled with disdain. "Get up," he mumbled, waving his hand dismissively. "That's my seat. I'm his real father, not you." My voice remained calm and measured. "There is ample seating with the other guests at the next table. Why don't you join them?" "No." This time, his voice was sharper, nearly growling. "This is my place. You need to leave." "My place? Who do you think you are?" I expected Melissa to interfere. To do something? Anything? To calm the situation. But she sat there, pale, staring down at her hands, as if they contained the solutions to all her problems. I took a deep breath and braced myself. It was Ethan's night. I wasn't going to let it get fully wrecked when I could avoid it. Let me be crystal clear, I continued, my gaze fixed on Kevin's. You have two options. Take a seat at the next table with the other guests, or have security escort you out. His face contorted in rage. Oh, listen to you, Mr. Moneybags, throwing his weight around? He spat, swaying slightly as he leaned on the table's edge for support. You think you can buy everything, don't you? Buy my son? Buy my family's love? Other guests began to stare. I could see some of my regulars at surrounding tables, pretending to seem uninterested but plainly paying attention to every word. My workers lurked around the room's boundaries, waiting for my cue. You just waltz in here with your fancy bar, your big house. Kevin spat again, his voice rising with each sentence. Think you can replace me just because you've got money? Well, guess what? You can't buy family. And before anyone could react, he reached out and threw a dish of charcuterie to the floor. The crash of glass broke the sudden dead silence of the bar. And then, another, and another. Fine cheeses and cured meats were strewn across the pricey marble flooring. A bottle of imported sparkling water tipped over and spilled upon the beautiful wood of the bar. I got my security team's attention and gave them a modest nod. They moved in smoothly and professionally, just as they had been trained. Sir, it's time for you to leave, the head of security stated forcefully, seizing Kevin's arm. I watched them walk him out. His inebriated complaints turned into slurred, unintelligible cries that bounced off the walls before the front door swung shut behind him. Silence. The guest's murmur resumed gradually, however. I rose and smiled brightly like my owner. Really sorry about this, ladies and gentlemen. Please, let the evening go on. Drinks are on the house. It didn't bother the regulars. They were used to it. After a few minutes, they returned to their chats. But at our table, Ethan's friends and relatives sat down. The whispers were incessant. I could see them cast glances toward Ethan, Melissa, and me. By dawn, the tale would have spread widely on social media. Ethan sat up straight and moved the food on his plate about. The sleek outfit that had previously made him appear so grown up now seemed to swallow him, making him small and defenseless. The Instagram-perfect celebration he had envisioned had swiftly turned into a nightmare. After about an hour, he moaned, I have a headache, can we go home? The party ended shortly after that. People offered polite excuses, but I could hear them whispering as they went. Poor Ethan. Did you see his dad? Can you believe what happened? Ethan went to his room as soon as we entered the house. I followed the girls upstairs and entered his room to speak with him. Say something. The next morning. The morning after the catastrophic birthday celebration, Ethan arrived at breakfast with circles under his eyes. He sat down in his chair, his gaze focused on his lap. How are you feeling, buddy? I inquired kindly. Fine, he mumbled into his cereal dish. And that was all. One word. The next days felt like I was living in a haunted house. Ethan, who used to be active and gregarious, had become almost unrecognizable. Every time I entered a room where he was conversing with Melissa, he would go silent, as if someone had pressed the mute button. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, I attempted to discuss it with Melissa. Don't you think we should do something? Maybe get him to talk to someone? She waved her hand dismissively. He's fine. He's just processing what happened. Give him space. But it wasn't okay. None of this was okay. Despite the stress in our household, we all went to Ethan's graduation ceremony. Melissa and I sat in the crowd, and when his name was called, I applauded so hard that my hands hurt. He looked terrific in his cap and gown. And for a minute, as he looked our way and smiled, I thought, maybe things were finally improving. Of course, we had a party later at our house. I knew I needed to do everything correctly. His favorites were all present. Truffle fries. Steak sliders. He would regularly take small crab cakes from the rear of the kitchen at the bar. Even the absurd 3-tiered chocolate cake, which should have taken at least a week to perfect. His classmates arrived, and for a time, the house was filled with laughing and exciting conversation about college plans and summer getaways. For a few hours, everything seemed almost normal again. Ethan smiled. Talking. He looks like his old self. I began to relax. I wondered if we'd turned a corner. Then his phone rang. Ethan stepped out into the hallway to answer it, and when he returned a few minutes later, there was something strange about his expression. A peaceful resolution. He approached me directly, for the first time in days, with any degree of willingness. My dad is coming over, he added. He wants to congratulate me on graduating. My stomach sank. Absolutely not, I responded without hesitation. The memories of his birthday calamity are still too clear. Ethan, think about what happened at your birthday. He showed up drunk. Caused a scene. Destroyed property. That was your fault. Ethan interrupted me, his voice rising. None of that would have happened if you had just moved and let him sit down. He's my real dad. You should have just stepped aside. I stood there, feeling as if I'd been punched in the stomach. All the time. After several days of stillness? Was this what he had been thinking? Was I the one to blame? I turned urgently to Melissa. I was hoping, for once, that she would say something. Simply step up. Be the mother that Ethan needed. I said, please, Melissa. Tell him how inappropriate his father's behavior was at the birthday party. But she sat there, looking at her hands, as if they held the mysteries of the cosmos. The same quiet. Same cowardice. The same thing I saw in the wine bar that night. Something inside of me cracked. 5 years of being the ideal stepfather. 5 years of treading on eggshells. 5 years of making excuses for everyone else's actions. 5 years of enduring frustration, and everything started gushing out. Listen to me, Ethan, I replied clearly and firmly. That was my wine bar. I set that whole party up for you. I got you that damn designer suit you wanted. I did absolutely everything to make that night perfect. And your dad? He arrived drunk. Publicly shamed you. And now has property damages. He didn't even get you a present, Ethan. All he did was bring chaos and embarrassment. In an instant, Ethan's expression changed from angry to furious. No. Ethan's face changed from angry to furious in an instant. Oh my God, here we go again, he exclaimed, throwing up his hands. It's all about the money with you, isn't it? I paid for this, I bought that? You think because you have money, you can control everything. He turned to face his classmates, who were standing awkwardly in the living room, clearly wishing they were somewhere else. My real dad will be here soon, he remarked with a sour laugh. It'll be nice to finally have a normal person here instead of this. He motioned toward me as if I were some filth he had stepped on. Your father is not coming into this house, I attempted to explain, adjusting my voice to counteract the rising rage and hurt within me. That was when Ethan completely lost it. His face turned red, and he started ranting at me in front of the entire crowd. You're not my dad, he yelled. You're nothing to me, you're nobody. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Keep your nose out of my life, you're just some guy my mom married for his money. The room fell completely silent. I could see his friends fidgeting uncomfortably, some checking their phones, some staring at the ceiling. Ethan went back to them, his voice venomous. Let's get out of here. I don't want to celebrate in his house anyway. He underlined his as if it were filthy. His friends hurriedly filed out, without making eye contact with me. The front door slammed so hard that the windows trembled. I stood there. Alone. In my own apartment. Surrounded by discarded food and strewn dishes. Hit by a simulated truck. This had to be it. It needed to be enough. Melissa would eventually, at last, say something? Would she defend me after this? Mel? Melissa cleared her throat. She spoke coldly, detached. You had no right to throw the house and money in his face like that, she told him bluntly. You didn't need to remind him this is your house, that your money pays for everything. That was low. I stared at her. I saw her for the first time. You've got to be kidding me right now. Where were you when your ex was hurling plates across my wine bar? Where were you just now, when your son stood up in front of his entire graduating class and started screaming insults at me? Melissa simply shook her head. As if I were the insane one. You're the adult here, she retorted. You should know better than to get into an argument with a teenager. I gave out a sour laugh. And you should know better than to bury your head in the sand like a coward, I said. But that's what you do, isn't it? You just sit there silently while your ex-husband and your son treat me like garbage. Well, guess what? I'm done being everyone's punching bag. Melissa's expression darkened. She didn't say anything. She turned and began walking upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the slam of the guest room door. The next morning breakfast seemed like a funeral. Melissa sat across from me, pushing scrambled eggs aimlessly around her plate while avoiding eye contact. I was just about to rise and leave the table when Ethan burst into the kitchen. Still dressed for last night's graduation celebration. I detected his beer breath somewhere between his door and the table. I looked sideways at Melissa, waiting for something. Anything. Her teenage son reeked of alcohol. Coming home at 9 a.m. However, as was often the case, she said nothing. She only stared at her plate. Where have you been all night? I inquired neutrally. Ethan turned to face me, his bloodshot eyes filled with hate. None of your business, he scoffed. You're not my dad. You're not anyone. Just some empty space taking up room in this house. Then he turned and staggered upstairs to bed. Melissa just sat there. Once again, there was silence. By this point, I was beginning to believe that silence was some kind of superpower she possessed. The week that followed was like trying to live in a house haunted by the poltergeist from hell. Ethan would not speak to me directly. Instead, he would speak about me as if I were not present. Dad, he'd tell Melissa, pointing to me as if I were a piece of furniture. Can you ask your husband to pass the salt? Or he'd walk into a room and tell his mother, this guy is in my way. And then simply stand there, waiting for me to move. I said nothing, I kept watching. 5 years. I'd wasted 5 years trying to be the ideal stepfather. Now, I was out. Let them show their true colors. And boy, was I prepared for a show and tell. Sunday. Melissa and I sat down for another silent dinner. Then Ethan burst into the dining room, waving an envelope around as if he'd won the lottery. Dad, I got in, he exclaimed, almost jumping up and down. NYU accepted me. I got into my dream school. I saw him run up to Melissa and hug her tightly. They were both grinning ear to ear. Ethan then turned to her and, with a sneer that I will never forget, said, Tell your husband he needs to pay for my tuition. Something inside me has just snapped. I smiled, but it was not a warm, pleasant smile. A chilly and sharp one. I won't be paying for your college education, I stated emphatically. You've made it very clear that I'm not your father. I'm nobody, remember? Well, guess what? This nobody's wallet is closed. Why don't you ask your real dad to pay for college? Ethan's cheeks became an awful shade of red. You vindictive piece of... He began shivering, tears welling in his eyes. But I didn't feel anything. You're doing this to punish me. You're just evil. I stood there, strangely calm as he screamed insults at me. It was like witnessing a hurricane from a window. I could see the turmoil, but it couldn't affect me anymore. Mom! Ethan exclaimed to Melissa. Make him pay, he has to pay. Melissa cleared her throat, adopting the patronizing tone I had come to despise. Come on, honey, quit joking around, she told me. You know you need to pay for Ethan's education. I pulled back my chair and stood up. I've made myself perfectly clear. I will not pay tens of thousands of dollars in tuition for someone who spent weeks telling me I'm nothing to him. Someone who treats me as if I don't exist in my own home. Then I turned and left the dining room. Ethan's shrieks followed me up the stairs. I could hear him having what sounded like another epic tantrum. Plates crash. Chair scraping. Theatrical sobs. Like father, like son, I reasoned bitterly. I sat in my bedroom, listening as the ruckus downstairs gradually subsided. But I knew it was not over. Melissa would be up shortly, eager to play a role in this family drama. Sure enough, approximately 30 minutes later, my bedroom door flew open. Melissa stormed in. Red-faced with rage. I'm sick of it, she exclaimed at me. Sick of you and your games? You need to grow up and pay for Ethan's education. I glanced at her calmly from where I sat on the bed. No. You and your ex can figure out how to pay for NYU. I'm sure between the two of you, you can work something out. Melissa's jaw constricted. She began pacing the room, like a caged animal. You're being completely selfish. He's just a teenager, for God's sake. You're the adult here, you need to be the bigger person, I observed her, remembering. She had used the same reasoning each time. Be the bigger person, Robert. Let it go, Robert. He's just a kid, Robert. Constantly making excuses? They were always smiling, nodding, and opening my wallet while treating me like dirt. I took a big breath and gently exhaled. A teenager who's old enough to know better, I remarked gently. An adolescent has made it abundantly apparent how he thinks about me. Why should I invest in his future when he has only shown me contempt? Melissa paused her pacing and gently turned toward me. Her expression was frigid. Fine then. Let me make this simple for you. Either you pay for Ethan's education, or I'm filing for divorce. She obviously expected me to cave, break down, cry, or beg her not to leave. To pay immediately. That is what the better man would do, correct? I shrugged. Okay. Get divorced. Her expression was almost comical, her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. Apparently, she did not expect me to call her bluff. I'll call my lawyer first thing in the morning, I stated with a stern voice. Until then, You and Ethan can start finding yourselves a new place to live." Melissa said nothing. She just stood there, staring at me, almost for the first time. Finally, without another word, she turned and walked out, silently closing the door behind her. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Ethan sitting at the dining table, waiting for me like an ambush. The scene was masterfully staged. Ethan has red-rimmed eyes. Melissa, with her finely honed expression of concerned authority. Melissa murmured, "Honey," with that deceitful smile I'd never noticed before. "We've all had a chance to calm down and think about things." Ethan nodded profusely, resembling a well-bred puppet. "We all just overreacted yesterday," he continued, his voice thick with honey. I paused in the doorway, a peculiar sense of clarity sweeping over me. It was like I was seeing them both for the first time. I really see them. Melissa went talking, her voice adopting the reasonable tone she often used when she desired something. "We're family. Families fight, but they also make up. And since you were the one who escalated things with this whole college situation, it would mean a lot if you took the first step toward reconciliation." Ethan jumped in on cue. "Yeah, and if you helped with tuition, it would show that you're really sorry and want to make things right." I nearly laughed. They genuinely believed they could influence me so easily. That all it would take was some staged remorse and scripted phrases about family. "Actually," I said as I reached for my cell, "I just got off the phone with my lawyer 5 minutes ago. The divorce papers should be ready by this afternoon." Their expressions shifted in an instant. Ethan's phony smile evaporated, leaving his face stunned. Melissa's face flushed a familiar angry red. I turned to Ethan. "Congratulations," I stated frankly. "You won't have to deal with your not-dad interfering in your life anymore. Isn't that what you wanted?" Ethan burst into tears. This time, they're real. Not the calculated ones from earlier. But I was tired of being deceived by teenage tears. Melissa rushed to her feet so quickly that her chair nearly collapsed. She stormed upstairs without saying another thing. Moments later, I heard her yanking drawers open and slamming closet doors. They packed in complete silence. No more harsh speeches? No more insincere apologies. Just the sound of luggage being stuffed and doors slamming. I believed it had finally ended. I was mistaken. The messages began that same night. First, from Melissa. "We all said things we regret. Let's talk about this like adults." Then from Ethan. "I am so sorry if I hurt your feelings, but you are really being totally unfair about college." When I said nothing, the text became more harsh. "You are being obstructive and destroying this family. I hope you enjoy being all alone with your money. You'll be sorry later when you're old and alone with nobody." I said nothing. I made sure there was a prenuptial agreement, so the divorce was speedy. Melissa naturally tried to oppose it. But my lawyer handled it swiftly. She received nothing. Not 1 penny of my wine bar's income. Not a single penny from my savings. I still hear about them from common friends. They live in a little apartment across town. Ethan couldn't afford NYU and now works in a mall. Melissa is striving to resume her accounting profession, but things aren't going well. Since then, I've redecorated the house. I got rid of all the furniture that reminded me of them. The space feels larger these days. Lighter, somehow? Or maybe it's just me. Finally liberated from the burden of attempting to purchase affection from those who were only interested in selling. My father demanded I attend my golden brother's wedding, threatening to cut my tuition. They were shocked when I revealed I earned more than him. My father has always treated me as the child in the family that is overlooked. He was simply infatuated with my brother. He continues. "You know what? I don't care if you got accepted to some prestigious college. You have to go to the local college because we don't want your brother to be jealous of you. So, you know what, guys?" I pretended everything was fine. I replied, "You know what, Dad? Okay, fine. I'll go to that college on one condition, I get to stay in the dorms." So, I lied to him. I pretended to reside in the dorms and attended the prestigious college on a scholarship he was unaware of. But when he finds out, he will erupt. What would you do if the people who had hardly noticed your presence for 3 years suddenly asked you to show up and act like a family member for one day? That would be a very hard scenario, right? I mean, it's always going to be like that with family, especially my own. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Jonas, and if you haven't figured by now, my family is quite dysfunctional. I mean it. That is, if it can even be considered a family. What do you name the individuals who gave birth to you but then abandoned you when they discovered a better version of you? Can that even be considered family? Instead than going in circles, let me state it clearly. I could have had a happy family if my parents had treated both of their children equally. But, no, my parents are a bunch of biased jerks who have been treating me as background noise for as long as I can remember, all because my brother Roman was the healthier kid. I mean, Roman was one of those healthy, adorable infants who drew everyone's attention in an instant, whereas I was the scrawny, average-looking one that no one wanted to hold. But should these things influence parents so profoundly that they begin to differentiate between their children? It shouldn't, right? But it was different for my parents, Patrick and Marin. Within a month of Roman's birth, he had become their golden kid, the infant who received universal adulation. I mean, he wasn't outstanding. He was merely the more attractive one, the main character, so everyone was drawn to him, whilst I was usually the supporting character, standing in the background, forgotten. You can imagine how dreadful my childhood must have been. My parents ignored me and just provided for my basic needs, while my egotistical brother let all of the attention get to him. Roman grew up as a pampered brat who only cared about himself. So you can picture the kind of relationship we had. I was the shy, introverted kid, and Roman turned out to be a huge fat bully. Could you imagine that? Are you being bullied by your little brother? Yeah, that was the case with me. Roman seemed to have made it his life's mission to make mine unhappy, whether by throwing wild tantrums that caused my parents to spoil my plans or by physically taking away the things I liked. Is this correct? It was a poor scenario in and of itself. Add a set of biased parents to the mix, and you can understand how terrible my upbringing was. My parents were the main reason Roman grew up to be such a brat. While Roman was showered with new toys, attention, and praise, I was never spoiled. My birthdays were a formality. My accomplishments were never particularly significant, and my job in the family was essentially that of a background prop. One time in 3rd grade, I had all A's on my report card. I was thrilled, you know? I figured maybe I'd get a pat on the back or something, but when I presented it to my mother, all she said was, "That's good," as she went on to rave about what a nice little painting Roman had done that we just had to put on the refrigerator. Yes, Roman's wonky dog drawing received center stage, while my straight A report card was placed into the garbage drawer with the other forgotten papers. So you know how things were. I felt like the neglected report card, while my brother was lauded for everything. But it wasn't just the small stuff. Oh no. Roman got to decide where we went on family trips, what we ate for dinner, and what we watched on television. Every time I attempted to select something, I was turned down. And that idiot Roman rubbed it in my face to the fullest extent possible. He was the king, and I was nothing more than his servant. So I guess you can see why I wanted to flee this hellhole as soon as I could. And I even had the perfect opportunity. I was looking to pursue a bachelor's degree and was awarded a scholarship to one of the world's finest institutions. It was a very prestigious college, the kind that assures a good career for its students. Getting a scholarship there? Oh, that is a dream. But here's the catch. It was many states away. And, like everything else in my life, my parents refused to let me have it. Click share and more to check if there is a part 2. Part 2. Do you want to discover the reason? Of course it was Roman. My parents even suggested that I attend the local institution in our state because it provided a greater opportunity and option. They reasoned that since Roman, who was not particularly bright academically, could feel bad that I had the opportunity to enroll at such a prominent college while he did not, I should stay local. What was stopping him? He could have worked his buttocks off, like I did, and received what he desired. However, none of this made sense to my parents. They told me I needed to go to the local college. You see how ludicrous this whole situation was? Somewhere in my mind, I assumed they were doing this to keep me from outshining Roman. It was as if they recognized my potential but consciously chose to disregard it. It's as if providing me with genuine support would jeopardize Roman's image as the golden child. Why else would they work so hard for me to stay at the local college while Roman, who was nothing near as ambitious, received unrivaled support? It seemed as if I was not meant to be more successful than him. That was not part of their script. But did I succumb to that foolishness? No. I'd already made significant sacrifices to keep up with the family's wacky, biased antics. But I decided I'd had enough. I told my parents that I would only attend the local college if they permitted me to live in the campus dorms. My parents agreed, a little too happily, thinking they'd persuaded me to stay at the local college. But did they actually? No chance in hell. I accepted the scholarship and relocated to another state while my parents thought I was attending a nearby college. The nicest aspect was that the prominent college I was admitted to offered the finance course I desired in just 2 years, whereas the local college required 4. So that was ideal since it meant I could graduate earlier than my parents had imagined. Honestly, It was the best decision I've ever made. Not only did I leave the hellhole my parents had created, but this college represented the pinnacle of prosperity. I say this because, shortly after graduating, I was offered a six-figure salary and have been with the company for a year. Things are actually improving for me, since I am on the verge of receiving a promotion. I did it all. The scholarship covered 70% of the fees, and I utilized the money my father contributed to meet other expenses. Now I'm having a fantastic life. My father continues to send me money, believing that I am a student at the local college. And I have not told him to stop. I know it's kind of terrible, but I consider it retribution for the last 3 years. I've had limited communication with my relatives. There were a few checkup calls here and there, as well as 1 or 2 trips to my home over the holidays, to keep them from becoming suspicious. Aside from that, they haven't troubled me too much, and I've been able to avoid them by explaining that I've been busy with my studies. They don't seem to care anyway. I mean, why should they? They had a golden child now. My parents benefited from the fact that the only person they had to care for was no longer in their lives. I was truly satisfied with the setup. It did hurt from time to time that my folks didn't notice I had moved states away. But the melancholy was offset by the relief of not having their toxic presence around me. Truth be told, I did miss having a family. Not a dysfunctional one like mine, but rather the feeling of having a family who genuinely cared about me. Despite my friends and pleasures, I felt that something was lacking in my life. However, until this morning, it appeared difficult to correct. My father called today to tell me that Roman was getting married and that he needed me there a few days before the wedding to help with the preparations. I was taken aback. Was my father truly urging me to come home? I had been looking forward to this moment for a long time, especially since he told me I was part of the family and that he wanted everyone to be present for Roman's big day. I truly became emotional. My parents had never acknowledged me as a member of their family. They were primarily concerned with themselves and Roman. But now my father specifically wanted me to attend the wedding. It was overwhelming to receive appreciation from my parents. But then I remembered that these were the ones who had ignored me throughout my childhood. Even today, they were unaware that their eldest son lives states away. Do I really want to return to these people, only to be disregarded again, as I have been my entire life? This is where I find myself in a quandary. And I'd like to ask you all. What would you do if you were in my shoes? I miss my sense of family, and it would be wonderful to have them care about me for once. But the prospect of returning back only to have my expectations shattered again terrifies me. Should I accept their invitation and attend my brother's wedding solely for the sake of family? Or should I stick to my commitment to live far away from them and not allow them to hurt me again? Before we get into that, it's been 2 days, and I've had plenty of time to consider what I should do. In the end, I decided to keep my peace. Even though some of you may disagree with my decision, I elected not to accept my father's invitation to Roman's wedding. And honestly, it feels like the best decision I have ever made. Spoiler alert, my parents haven't changed and never will. Let me continue where I left off in my initial post. After some thinking, I texted my father, just saying that I wouldn't be able to make it. There is no lengthy explanation, no excuses. To be honest, I was not going to come. I expected some reaction, but I didn't expect the manipulation to start so early. Within an hour, my phone was flooded with text messages. First, my mother attempted to guilt trip me. She inquired if I truly wanted to miss Roman's special day. If I wanted to be that brother. And how disappointed Roman would be if I wasn't present. She went on to say how much it would mean to Roman if his older brother was there. Really? She also attempted to play the game in which you only got one family card. But here's the thing, Roman's big day meant nothing to me. Because Roman had never cared about any of my significant occasions. Not one. And yes, you only have one family. Part 3. But only if they behave appropriately, you know? So I informed my mother the same thing, I was not coming. When guilt tripping failed, my father resorted to his own bizarre tactics. He attempted to keep it calm at first, stating things like how families should stick together on situations like these. When I still didn't move, he decided to play dirty. He called and stated that if I didn't show up for Roman's wedding, they would cease paying my tuition costs. He stated they couldn't afford for people to gossip about how one of their sons wasn't present at such an important event. Essentially, they wanted to maintain the appearance of a happy family for their friends and neighbors. As is customary, everything revolved around appearances. Not about me. Not about Roman. But what about how the family was perceived by others? That's when I really lost it. I mean, how selfish could somebody be? Threatening to cease paying my education expenses just so I may attend a wedding. It was incredibly foolish. even more so given that I didn't care about any of the money they handed me. I responded by telling my dad, "Go ahead. Stop paying the college fees. I'm not coming to the wedding, and nothing you say or threaten will change that." I still hadn't told them that I had graduated a year ago and was living states away with a six-figure salary and a life they could never have provided me. I didn't want them to know how good my life was or where I was because they would ruin everything that was going well. I know I have to tell them the truth, and I will do so shortly. But right now, I was having fun. My unwillingness to attend my brother's wedding, despite my father's warnings, enraged him. He spoke about how ungrateful I was. How I've always been difficult. And how Dad planned to withdraw my name from the local college to teach me a lesson. He said it as if it were a huge threat, as if being pulled from a place I'd never even been to would destroy me. He had no idea that the truth was just the opposite. Honestly, I couldn't stop laughing. I could have told him I had never attended the local college, but where's the fun in that, guys? So now I'm simply waiting for my father to go and try to withdraw my name from a college where I was never enrolled. I'm honestly waiting for his reaction when he discovers I no longer need him or his money. That's going to be shocking. And it's only a matter of time before my phone calls with another round of obscenities. I honestly cannot wait. Anyway, I'll keep you all posted on what happens. Until then, so long. Hello, it's Jonas again. I know it's only been a day since my last update, but the never-ending drama in my life has gotten even wilder. After my last post, I had a feeling my father would take my unwillingness to attend Roman's wedding seriously. It turns out I was correct. It all began with a phone call from him this morning, and he was furious. He was irate and wasted no time in asking me where I'd been all this time and what the heck I'd been doing with all the money he provided for my college expenses. It was like witnessing a toddler throw a tantrum because he did not get his favorite toy. Only this time, it was my father who was driven insane by the happenings around him. Apparently, after our last chat, my father went to the local college. Yes, this is when things become really fascinating. He went there to withdraw my name, simply to teach me a lesson. That guy was so crazy that he thought pulling my name from college and suspending my studies would force me to attend Roman's wedding. Clearly, he was wrong. So, obviously, when my father went to the local college, he was in for a huge surprise. The local college had no record of my enrollment. It must have been quite the spectacle. My father stood there, attempting to cancel my registration when Jonas was not present at college. I bet the revelation hit him like a blow to the belly. During our call, his bitterness over his momentary humiliation at college was evident. He wanted to know where I had been for the past 3 months and what I had been doing with all that money. But, honestly, the situation was so absurd that I couldn't stop laughing. After more harsh remarks from my father and some waiting on my part, I decided to tell him the whole truth. I told him that I had graduated on a scholarship a year ago and that the money he had been giving for my college tuition had been extremely helpful. Then I dropped the larger bomb. I informed him that I now had a 6-figure salary and was making more than him. When he inquired whether I was kidding, I could tell he was disappointed. But he realized it wasn't a joke. The fact that I was no longer the struggling student he thought I was, but rather an independent man with a fulfilling life, must have been a difficult pill for him to swallow. I was ready for whatever came next. As soon as my father understood what I had just said, he erupted, accusing me of treason for keeping them in the dark. He went on about how much he had done for me, only to be confronted with this betrayal. Done so much for me? Was he talking about how he and my mother ignored me for years to focus on their favored child? Then he came up with the most ridiculous idea imaginable. He said the only way he could forgive me was if I went to Roman's wedding and made sure there was no scandal or gossip about the family. I could not believe it. This individual was still primarily concerned with his image. I don't understand why he's suddenly fascinated with the family's image. It had never disturbed him before. Anyway, I told him I didn't need his forgiveness, and I certainly didn't want to be a part of their ruse, pretending we were all one happy family. My father, still upset, tried to persuade me to attend the wedding. He appeared frantic at this point, but I held my ground. I told him there was no way in hell I'd go to the wedding of the man who devastated my childhood. Not only that, but I informed him I was done with the drama and would cut them off. My father was shocked, but I did not remain silent. I had spent my entire childhood absorbing everything silently. But not anymore. I told him I didn't want any of them to contact me again and that they could attend their golden son's wedding without me while I enjoyed my life. My father attempted to influence me emotionally again. But this time, I wouldn't have it. Talking about how I was his kid and how I needed to attend my brother's wedding. But I was finished. I just informed him that he had only one son since he was the one they all appeared to care about, and that they could keep it that way. As I gladly cut them off, I didn't even give my father another time to respond. I quickly ended the call and blocked his phone. And here is where I am right now, officially cut off from my family's harmful presence. It's a bittersweet feeling because I never imagined things coming to this. But I am also somewhat satisfied since I know it had to be done. At least now I can live a calm life. And if all goes well, maybe I'll be able to start my own family one day. So it's been more than a month since I shut off communication with my family. I thought I was above all the drama and manipulation. But they clearly couldn't let things go so simply. A few days ago, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. It was my mother, and she was sobbing uncontrollably. I had banned all of their calls, so I was surprised to receive this one. I decided not to hang up on her because I suspected something horrible had happened. But it was nothing like that. She began telling me how much she misses me and how she simply wants her kid back. She stated she didn't care what I or Dad did. None of it mattered to her. She simply wanted me to be a member of the family again. I was perplexed. I mean, where was this energy previously? When I told them I was cutting them off, they didn't seem to mind. And now my mother wants to patch things up? Don't you think that was a bit suspicious? So I just hung up on her, telling her I'd call her later. I had a sense something wasn't right, so I contacted my aunt, my mother's sister, to see if she had any ideas. What she told me was bizarre and it verified all of my suspicions. Apparently, Roman's wedding was a complete fiasco. A massive shitstorm. His seemingly beautiful fiancée turned out to be a full-fledged fraudster. Before the wedding, she persuaded Roman, my parents, and a group of family members to put all of their savings into a dodgy, once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. And guess what? It was all a hoax. She took the money and dipped. There were no weddings. She's gone, as are my family's savings. However, it wasn't the end of it. My aunt also informed me that my parents were in even more serious difficulty than I had suspected. Apparently, my father provoked a disturbance with an employee and his family, resulting in a significant loss for his already dying firm. And then everything clicked for me. This is why he was so eager to invite me to the wedding. He wanted to salvage his image by demonstrating how much he treasured his perfect family, and all those values. But of course, that did not work. This fiasco between Roman and his fiancée just added to the negative news. So, basically, they are losing money left and right. To make matters worse, they used their house as collateral for a loan in an attempt to salvage the firm. However, this also backfired on them. And now they are likely to lose their home. They had to move into a dilapidated trailer or studio apartment because that's all they could afford. Now everything was plain to me. My mother didn't call because she missed me or wanted me back. They urgently needed me. They realized I was doing well for myself and wanted to use me as a safety net. I understood everything. They were out of options, and I was their only hope. So, I wasn't playing that game. I was not going to be dragged back into their mess, especially now that I had seen the whole picture. They didn't care about me because they were too busy catering to Roman and his needs. But here's the catch. My parents are now fighting with Roman because they blame him for everything. For the entire wedding fiasco. For all the money they've lost. It's actually pretty funny. The golden child they built their lives around has ruined everything. And, to be honest, it made me happy that they were finally realizing their mistakes. Anyway, I could care less. I'm staying out of the controversy. After my mother called, I blocked her again. I wasn't going to let her control my emotions. But did this prevent my parents from reaching out? No, absolutely not. They were needy and clingy, refusing to accept that things weren't going their way. My parents eventually showed up at my house. Do not ask me how. I'm not sure how they got the address, but I believe they badgered some of my old friends for information. However, the how does not matter. What matters is that they showed up at my door, reminding me of family values, and that, as their older son, I was their responsibility. And now, somehow, they were mine. I slammed the door in their faces, of course. They begged me to help them, claiming they were penniless and had spent their last money on a flight to meet me. That sucked for them, but I wasn't going to help. This is not the end of it. A few days later, Roman arrived at my home, practically crying and pleading for help. He stated that he missed having his big brother in his life. I'm not sure what big brother he's referring to because all I remember is him bullying me. I warned him, but he kept begging, saying Mom and Dad were going to cut him off shortly because they were angry with him for putting them into this problem. It was all for nothing. Roman shared the same fate as my parents. I locked the door in his face, warning him that if any of them returned, I'd call the cops. Since then, I haven't heard from any of them, and I honestly don't care. I am done with this toxic family. I'm a little sad that things with my family have come to this. Because the void they created will always be present in my life. But I'm not going to take their trash anymore, just for the sake of family. My brother drove recklessly, often drunk, crashed into a tree, and our parents covered it up, then demanded I pay $14,500. Hey Reddit, so my parents got my golden child brother a Tesla and then attempted to blame me after he crashed it. Buckle up, because this is going to be the most shocking family betrayal story you've read all week. So, since I was a child, I, 24 male, have had the worst luck in my family. My parents see my younger brother, Tristan, 21 male, as the golden child, capable of doing no wrong. The partiality in our household is so evident that it would make a sitcom writer blush. I'm not even exaggerating, this is straight up everybody loves Raymond material. Let me break it down for you. Since I turned 18, I've been required to pay a $400 monthly rent to live at home. Yes, you read that correctly. $400 to live in the same house where I grew up, in a bedroom that hasn't been changed since I was 12. Meanwhile, my brother lives fully rent-free, eating food I help pay for, using utilities I help cover, and overall acting as if he owns the entire home. When I finally had the courage to call out this obvious BS, my parents attacked me with the typical nonsense that parents employ when they realize they don't have a true explanation. The double standards do not end there. When I was in high school, I had to keep a 3.8 GPA while working weekends at a nearby hardware store. I was not permitted to attend parties since I needed to focus on my future. Tristan? This guy barely completed his classes, never worked during high school, and was permitted to party every weekend since he's just being social and needs to enjoy his youth. Every accomplishment of mine received a half-hearted compliment, whereas Tristan was commended for putting forth the bare minimum effort. I labored more than 40 hours each week at my soul-crushing corporate job only to save enough money to leave this hellhole. My objective has been to save enough for a quality apartment and the first and last month's rent, but every time I get near, some inexplicable family emergency arises. And guess who is supposed to help out? I graduated from college 3 years ago. I worked part-time while taking a full course load, graduated with honors, and found a job within 2 weeks of graduation. What is my reward for this achievement? A half-hearted congratulations text with a $50 Applebee's gift card. There is no party, celebration supper, or anything. Simply put, here's some mediocre chain restaurant cuisine, now keep paying your rent. Tristan finished this month with a strong 2.4 GPA following 6 years of what I guess was professional beer pong training. This guy changed his major 3 times, failed many classes that he had to repeat, and essentially treated college as an extended vacation with occasional paper writing assignments. And how did my folks celebrate his lousy achievement? They purchased him a Tesla Model 3 Performance. Not the standard model, but the $60,000 plus option with all the bells and whistles. Premium sound system, the works. I still recall the day they handed it to him. We were all gathered in the driveway, when my father handed Tristan this small box. Inside are the keys to the dazzling white Tesla sitting across the street. Tristan starts freaking out and dancing around like he's won the lotto, while my mother shoots around 500 photos for Facebook. My father looks at me, notices my expression, and says, "Don't be jealous. Your brother deserves this after working so hard." What exactly are you working hard at? Beer pong championships? When I mentioned that I graduated with honors in 4 years despite working and earning nothing, my mother had the gall to comment, "Well, college was easier for you. Tristan really struggled. He struggled to get out of bed before noon and remember who he was dating that week." I could go on for hours on the obvious partiality, but you get the point. My entire life, I've been treated as a second-class person within my own family. Tristan's entire personality was transformed the moment he received the Tesla. I am not even kidding. Dude couldn't go 5 minutes without discussing his whip or sharing Instagram stories from the dashboard. The car was no longer merely a mode of mobility for him. It had become his entire personality. Tesla Bro was born, and it was as annoying as it sounds. Every night, he would arrive home at 2 a.m., from whatever bar he was at and rev the engine in the driveway like a true tool. Yes, I understand that Teslas do not have engines to rev, but this dip would floor the acceleration back and forth in our driveway, producing that electric whirring noise at full blast. He'd wake up the entire neighborhood since, obviously, sleep is reserved for peasants who don't own the electric automobiles that Daddy purchased. The youngster drove like he was auditioning for Fast and Furious 27. Electric Baloo, driving down residential streets where children play, performing donuts in grocery store parking lots, and recording those TikTok videos where people pretend to sleep while their Tesla is on autopilot. Every time I suggested that treating public highways like his personal racetrack wasn't the best idea, he'd smirk and tell me to quit being such a buzzkill, bro. I even saw him drive intoxicated several times. This wasn't just being a douche, it was actively hazardous to those around him. I offered to be his designated driver several times or to call him an Uber, but he declined. The automobile basically drives itself, bro. Except that autopilot does not magically eliminate the effects of drinking on your judgment and reaction time. His friends fared no better. They would pack into the Tesla, usually 4 or 5 of them, all equally wasted, and go on a joyride. Their words, not mine. I warned them all several times that something horrible was about to happen. I also warned my parents. Everyone urged me to mind my own business. My mother genuinely said, and I'm quoting exactly here, "You're just jealous you don't have friends who want to have fun with you." Yes, Mom, I'm quite envious since I don't have buddies who wish to die in a catastrophic crash or kill innocent people. You caught me. With each passing day, Tristan became more reckless. The videos become more dangerous. The speeds increased. It wasn't a matter of whether something would happen, but when. Everyone, except me, appeared utterly unaware of what was about to happen. But then the inevitable occurred. On a Thursday night, I was in my room working when I heard my parents' door bang open at 3 a.m. There was frenzied talking in the hallway, followed by my father's car starting and rushing away. I found my mother downstairs, looking as if she had seen a ghost. When I asked what was going on, she murmured something about, "Your brother had a little accident with the Tesla, and that my father had gone to pick him up. A minor collision." That's family code for a catastrophic blunder that they're already plotting how to avoid. Around 4:30 a.m., I heard my father's car arrive into our driveway. I went to the front window and saw him almost pulling Tristan along the walkway. He could barely walk, was missing a shoe, and had what seemed to be dried blood on his forehead. My father was desperately shushing Tristan as he slurred, "Tree came out of nowhere, man." It turns out that Golden Boy wrapped his Tesla around a tree after leaving a bar. Isn't that shocking? Who could have expected this absolutely unpredictable incident, which I had been warning everyone about for weeks? By some miracle, he was not gravely injured, only a gash on his forehead and possibly some bruises from the airbag. However, the Tesla was nearly destroyed. Front end was smashed in. Airbags were deployed. The windshield cracked. The whole 9 yards. They escorted him to his room as if he were a baby who had stayed up past bedtime rather than a grown-ass man who had just committed a crime. I didn't get the complete story until the following morning. Tristan had been to the Rusty Nail. He got completely inebriated with his equally intelligent companions and then concluded that driving was an excellent idea. His friends, these stand-up citizens, appear to have encouraged this scheme, with one even videoed Tristan doing shots and then twirling his Tesla key, saying, "Let's see what this baby can really do." On his way home, he turned an extremely fast corner, lost control, jumped the curb, and plowed into a large oak tree owned by a poor homeowner. My father arrived ahead of the police. According to my mother's whispered phone call to my aunt, which I completely overheard, my father handled the situation with the homeowners. I have no idea what he promised them, but knowing my father, it was not cheap. He probably wrote them a check right away and forgot about it. The true mystery was how he persuaded them not to report the incident to the police. They had the Tesla towed to our garage, where it sat like a massive metal middle finger. The front end had entirely caved in. The hood collapsed like an accordion. Both airbags had deployed, leaving a strange powder residue across the interior. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks, and one of the front wheels was deformed at an angle that was clearly not factory standard. It was now a $60,000 paperweight. The garage door remained closed. 2 days after the accident, my parents arranged a family meeting in the living room. Throughout the history of family meetings, no one has ever been called to deliver good news. Nobody ever calls a family meeting and says, "Hey, we're all going to Disney World." So, I entered the living room. My parents were seated on the couch, making those serious faces you see when someone is ready to beg for a favor. Tristan slouched in the armchair, swiping through his phone as if the entire situation was a little inconvenience, diverting his attention away from his crucial TikTok perusing. The bruise on his face had turned a gorgeous shade of yellow-purple, which actually complemented his attractiveness. My father cleared his throat and looked at me with that fake serious expression he has when he's going to say something absolutely absurd but wants to appear logical and fair. He has a routine that includes straightening his back, clearing his throat, and clasping his hands together. It's like watching a nervous actress practice for a scene. "Son," he called out. "We've looked into the damage to Tristan's car." He said it as if Tesla had acquired a cold. "The insurance won't cover it because..." He trailed off, visibly uneasy. "Because he was driving drunk," I concluded for him, My mother gave me a look that could curdle milk. Don't be dramatic. He'd only had a few drinks. Right. After a few beers, he was unable to walk straight or construct intelligible sentences when he returned home. In my mother's world, anything less than being completely unconscious is considered a couple beers. My father continued as if I had not spoken. The point is, repairs are going to cost around $18,000, and we think it's only fair that we all chip in as a family. I actually laughed aloud, believing it was a joke. I then knew they were serious. They had the audacity, the ultimate brass balls, to ask me to assist pay for repairs on a car that I don't own, don't drive, and was damaged because he chose to drive drunk and smash it. I couldn't believe what I heard. You want me to help pay for repairs on a car that I don't own, don't drive, and was damaged because he decided to drive drunk? I asked again, just to be sure I wasn't having a stroke and hallucinating this conversation. We're a family, my mother remarked, as if that clarified everything. And you're the only one with significant savings right now. Ah. There it was. They knew I had been saving to move out, and they saw it as a handy way to compensate for their golden child's error. My savings were not for my future. It was simply an emergency fund for Christ's fuck-ups. I get it. How much are you expecting me to chip in? I said, using air quotes around chip in because we all knew that meant pay for the most of it. My father had the decency to appear slightly uncomfortable. Well, your mother and I can put in about $3,000 from our emergency fund. Tristan has about $500 saved up. LOL. Of course, Tristan only had $500 to his name, despite never having paid rent or expenses. That money was undoubtedly set aside for marijuana and whatever pricey streetwear brand he was into that month. So you want me to pay the other $14,500? I completed for him. It was not a question. My dad nodded, happy that I understood. We'll figure out a payment plan. Maybe $1,000 a month until it's paid off. We know you've been saving up. Tristan finally looked up from his phone and added, it's not like you need a fancy apartment anyway. You're always working. The chutzpah of this child could power a small city. He smashes his Tesla, the one I cautioned him not to drive drunk in, and then gives me financial advice on how I should spend my hard-earned money. I got money by working 2 jobs and paying rent to my own parents. That was when I lost it. I laughed again, but not in a good way. It was the kind of chuckle you have when something is so ridiculous that you can't be furious about it anymore. I'm not giving you a single cent for this, I stated, looking each of them in the eyes. Tristan crashed the car because he was driving drunk, and he should be grateful he's not sharing a cell with some guy named Bubba right now. This is his problem, not mine. My parents looked at me as if I had suggested sacrificing the family dog. After everything we've done for you, my mother began, her voice shaking in that manipulative tone she'd honed over the years. The Guilt Trip Express was departing the station. What have you done for me exactly? I was wondering. Made me pay rent while he lives free? Given him a Tesla while I drive a car that's older than his driver's license? Constantly dismissed my accomplishments while celebrating his mediocrity. Please, elaborate on all you've done for me that justifies me paying for his drunk driving accident. My father's face got that distinct shade of red that only comes when someone questions his authority. You will contribute to fixing your brother's car. End of discussion. I stood up, surprised at how peaceful I felt. No, I won't. End of my discussion. The expressions on their faces were priceless. They were so used to me giving in, to being the responsible one who makes sacrifices for the family, that they couldn't accept this new version of me who wasn't going to give up. You're being selfish, my mother said, pulling out the final weapon from her arsenal. No, I'm being realistic, I explained. Tristan chose to drive drunk. He chose to crash the car. That means he can deal with the consequences for once in his life. I walked out of the living room and back to my room, rejecting their request to return and discuss this like adults. The irony of their sudden desire for an adult talk was not lost on me. As I closed my bedroom door, I heard Tristan say, so does this mean I'm not getting the car fixed? That kid is always focused on his goals. I had no idea what they would do next, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over. In my family, no is not considered a complete response. It's simply an opportunity to find more innovative ways to achieve what they desire. My parents scarcely spoke to me for the following few days, only asking whether I had reconsidered their gracious offer to let me pay for Tristan's error. I kept my responses short and to the point. No. This resulted in a lot of heavy sighs, slammed doors, and my mother engaging in passive-aggressive behavior by talking about me in the third person when I'm literally in the same room. Some people just don't understand family loyalty, she would say to no one in particular as I ate breakfast 3 feet away from her. "You're really subtle, Mom." I saw them whispering a couple times while hunched around the kitchen table, papers strewn out. When I walked in, they would quiet down. This was never a positive indicator in my family. When people stop talking when you walk into a room, you can bet your ass they're talking about you, and not in a way that suggests they're arranging his surprise party. Friday night, I arrived home from work to find my father on the phone with an insurance company representative. He was speaking in his professional voice, which he uses to persuade others that he isn't a liar. I heard language like complete coverage and vandalism claims before he noticed me and took the call into his office. Vandalism claim? That was new. Drunk driving into a tree is not considered vandalism, unless the tree filed charges. I assumed they were grasping at straws, hoping to find some way to get the insurer to pay. Good luck with it. Insurance firms hire entire departments whose sole responsibility is to find reasons not to pay claims. But, whatever. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Saturday morning, setup. Saturday morning began with a boom, literally. I was jerked awake at 7 a.m. It sounded like someone was bashing the crap out of a metal trash can. I stumbled out of bed and looked out my window, which overlooked our driveway, but I saw nothing strange. The noise had stopped. I assumed it was just the garbage collectors being overly aggressive and went back to bed. Approximately 1 hour later, all hell broke loose. I awoke to shouts from the garage. I put on some sweatpants and headed downstairs to see Tristan standing in the open garage, my parents behind him. All three were staring at the Tesla. The car was significantly more damaged than before. And I don't mean a bit more damaged, it appeared that the Hulk had a particular vendetta against it. The windshield had entirely smashed. All of the windows were broken. There were significant damages in the doors and hood. The side mirrors were dangling from cables. One of the headlights had just disappeared. Everything was almost impressive how completely ruined everything was. What the hell happened? I questioned, completely perplexed. Sure, the automobile was messed up from the incident, but this was on another level. Tristan whirled around, his face flushed with apparent wrath. Like you don't know? You did this? I actually laughed. I was asleep all night. I didn't touch your car. My father held up something, a baseball bat. My baseball bat. From my high school days. The one I kept in my closet as a reminder of when I played. Then why was this in the bushes outside? My father inquired, his voice doing that phony calm thing that indicates he's actually quite upset. I responded I had no idea, but my mother cut me off. Don't lie to us. It was my bat, which I had possessed for years. But I hadn't touched it for months. It sat in the back of my closet, alongside other high school sports gear I never utilized. We've already called the insurance company, my father said smugly. They're sending an investigator on Monday. We told them someone vandalized the car out of jealousy. That's when something clicked. Tristan must have stolen my bat and further damaged his already damaged Tesla. He then placed the bat to frame me. The insurance wouldn't cover the drunk driving accident. What about vandalism? This might be covered. Bonus points for exacting retribution on Big Bro, who refused to pay for his error. Now it made sense. I looked at Tristan and noticed the small smile he was trying so hard to disguise. This wasn't simply him being a spoiled brat. This was true malice. He purposely set me up. And my parents were in on it. You're seriously going to frame me for this? I questioned, gazing directly at Tristan. He smirked. Who do you think they'll believe? He was asking. The straight A student with a bright future or the jealous older brother who still lives at home and complains about everything? My parents stood behind him, their arms crossed. A united front, against me. They had already chosen their side, as they always did. It didn't matter that they were committing insurance fraud, which is a criminal. It didn't matter that they were willing to blame me for something I hadn't done. All that mattered was to preserve their golden child. This is bullshit, and you know it, I remarked, surprisingly cool given the situation. I didn't touch the car. I was asleep all night. My mother scoffed. We heard you leave your room around 2 a.m. The neighbor's security camera probably caught you too. That was intriguing. We didn't have any neighbors with security cameras, at least not ones that could capture our driveway or garage. They were lying. That meant they knew exactly what had transpired. Because they helped plan it. Or, at the absolute least, they knew Tristan had done it and were covering for him. So let me get this straight, I responded, crossing my arms. You want me to either pay $14,500 for repairs to a car I don't own, or you'll frame me for vandalizing it to commit insurance fraud? Those are my options? My father's face reddened. Nobody's framing anyone. We know you did this because you're angry about the money. I returned to my room without saying another thing. There was no point in arguing with them. They had already determined their interpretation of reality. I closed the door, sat on my bed, and tried to think. This quickly went from ordinary familial bias to outright criminal activity. I grabbed my phone and called my supervisor, requesting an emergency day off for Monday. I was not going to leave my defense in the hands of my family when the insurance investigator showed there. I needed to be there to explain my side of the story. As I hung up, I realized something that made my stomach sink. My parents had just shown me how far they would go to protect Tristan. They would frame their son. They would lie to the authorities. Which made me wonder, what had they covered up for him in the past that I had no idea about? Monday. The insurance investigator arrives. The insurance investigator arrived on Monday morning at precisely 9 a.m. His name was Mac. I've seen this sort before. He had a wrinkled button-down tucked into khakis and was carrying a tablet and a camera. My father tried to convince me to go to work and they would handle everything, but I just stared at him until he gave up. It's funny how quickly his power dissolved when I didn't immediately roll over. My parents did their best June and Ward Cleaver impressions when Mac came. Tristan slouched nearby, appearing victimized, and periodically caressing the mark on his face for dramatic effect. Mac was courteous, but all business. He walked immediately to the garage to study the Tesla, snapping dozens of shots from all angles. He spent a long time comparing the front-end damage to the new damage, which made me think he would realize the obvious. This automobile had been involved in two quite distinct accidents. After inspecting the vehicle, Mac requested to meet with each of us individually. My parents went first, together. They stayed there for around 30 minutes. Then Tristan walked in for his interview, which lasted approximately 15 minutes. I heard him raise his voice at one point, most likely for dramatic effect. When it was my turn, I sat across from Mac at our kitchen table, where he had already set up his laptop and some documents. He glanced at me and said he had some concerns concerning where I was on Friday night and early Saturday morning. I told him the truth. I was sleeping in my bed at home. I got home from work at 6 p.m., cooked a sandwich, played Xbox, and went to bed around 11 p.m. I didn't leave my room until I heard a disturbance in the garage the following morning. Mac nodded, taking notes. Then he asked me directly if I was responsible for the Tesla's damage. No, I replied, staring him directly in the eye. And here's what you need to know that they probably didn't tell you. That car was already significantly damaged before this so-called vandalism happened. He raised his eyebrows, displaying the most passion he'd shown thus far. I described everything. Tristan received the Tesla as a gift after his lackluster graduation. He had been driving dangerously since he received it. I told Mac about the drunken driving, speeding, and TikTok videos. Then I came to the crash. How Tristan had wrapped it around a tree while driving drunk about a week before, and how my parents had managed to evade arrest. Check the airbags, I informed him. They've already been deployed from the first crash. Take a look at the front-end damage and the new damage. They are plainly different. The front-end damage is the result of an impact with a tree. The rest is not from me. I also informed him about my parents' attempt to get me to pay $14,500 for repairs, and how the vandalism occurred unexpectedly shortly after I declined. Mac wrote everything down without much reaction. Then he questioned whether anyone could confirm that I was in my room all night. No, I explained. I live with my parents and Tristan. However, I did order a pizza around 9:30 p.m. On Friday, I spent approximately 11 hours playing Xbox Live with pals. They can certify that I was online. He nodded and took additional notes. Then he startled me by asking if any of my neighbors had security cameras. Not that would cover our garage or driveway, I replied. The Johnsons across the street have a doorbell camera, but it only sees their porch. He wrote something down, thanked me, and promised to contact the family soon. As we walked back into the living room, I could feel my parents and Tristan staring at me. They realized I hadn't followed their script. After Mac left, all hell broke loose. After Mac left, all hell broke loose. My folks have lost their collective brains. How dare I reveal the truth to the investigator? The horror. My mother cried because I was attempting to ruin Tristan's life over a single mistake, as if drunk driving and insurance fraud were on par with forgetting to take out the garbage. My father got in my face, pointing his finger, and told me I should call the investigator back and rectify this if I knew what was best for me. Tristan just smirked from the couch, knowing that his plan would succeed. Because it always has. The golden child always wins, right? I returned to my room and locked the door, disregarding their requests to return downstairs. For the next 2 days, I went to work, returned home, went directly to my room, and closed the door. I ordered delivery meals and only came out once I realized they were asleep. It was like living in a hostile foreign country where I didn't understand the language and everyone despised me. Wednesday. A text from Mac. On Wednesday afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Mac with State Farm Insurance. Please meet me on Main Street at 4 p.m. today. I have a few follow-up questions. I replied back to say I'd be there. I did not notify my family where I was going. I left work and headed straight to Starbucks. Mac was already present, seated at a corner table with his laptop and stack of papers. He motioned me to sit down. I wanted to talk to you away from your family, he continued with a low voice. We've uncovered some inconsistencies in the claim. Mac turned out to be more thorough than my family had anticipated. He'd scoured the neighborhood for security footage, and discovered anything. Last month, the neighbors 2 doors down installed a new security system featuring a wide-angle camera that covered the majority of the street. And guess what it caught? At 2:13 a.m. on Saturday morning, Tristan took my baseball bat from my car's trunk, where I kept sports equipment, and drove off in his already damaged Tesla. The video saw him carefully breaking every window, denting the hood and doors, and even pulling off one of the side mirrors. Max slid his tablet across the table, showing me the footage. There was my brother. At 2 a.m., staging the entire thing. It was so apparent and humorous. I've been doing this job for 15 years, Mac blurted out. And this is one of the dumbest frame jobs I've ever seen. He then informed me that he had previously reported the facts to his superiors at the insurance firm. They denied the claim and referred the case to their fraud department. He had also contacted the local police, who wanted to talk with both me and Tristan. The police officer will be here in about 10 minutes, Mac continued. And I wanted to let you know before they contact your family. Given the circumstances, I thought you might like to speak with them separately. I really thanked him for his thoroughness and belief in me. The police get involved. A police officer arrived. She was a woman. She took my statement, showed me the footage again, and asked if I wanted to file charges against Tristan for attempting to frame me. The DA will decide whether to pursue the insurance fraud charges, she replied. But for the false reporting and the attempt to frame you, that's your call. I sat there, contemplating. Yes, Tristan is my brother, flesh and blood. But he was also the one who purposefully attempted to frame me for a crime I did not commit. The person who would have gladly let me take the blame for his drunk driving and subsequent tantrum, potentially destroying my record, employment prospects, and life. I considered all the years of favoring. All those double standards. All the times I was made to feel inferior because I was not Tristan. I reflected on how they were willing to let me take the blame for insurance fraud to protect him. And then I realized how tired I was of it all. Yes, I informed the police. I want to press charges. Without hesitation. Only a simple yes. She nodded, took some notes, and invited me to the station later to provide a formal statement. We decided on 6 p.m. that evening. Coming home to chaos. I drove home, getting into our driveway around 5 p.m. to grab a few items before heading to the police station. To my amazement, a police cruiser was already parked in front. Officer Rivera seems to have made good use of his time. Walking into my residence at that time was like walking into a battle zone. My mother was pacing and crying in the living room. Dad was on the phone with someone, hurriedly discussing misunderstandings and family issues. Tristan sat on the couch, looking pallid. He usually had a perpetual smug grin, like the cat who ate the canary and successfully blamed it on the dog. When my mother noticed me, she ran over. What did you do? The cops were just here. They think Tristan might be charged with fraud. I did not do anything. Tristan committed this to himself when he decided to blame me for vandalizing his car. My father hung off the phone and stormed over. This is ridiculous. We can deal with this as a family. You should contact them back right now and tell them you don't want to press charges. No, I simply replied. I'm done covering for him. I'm done being the fall guy. None of you can make me drop the charges right now. The aftermath? A full-fledged meltdown. The fallout was exactly what you would expect. My mother alternated between sobbing and attempting to guilt me into withdrawing the allegations. My father alternated between frightening me and providing money. Suddenly, he could assist me with the rent for a new apartment, if I only made this disappear. Tristan tried to apologize, but it came off as sorry I got caught, rather than sorry I'm a scheming asshole. At 5:45, I walked upstairs. I knew I didn't want to return to this place after delivering my statement, so I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my laptop, and some critical documents. When I returned downstairs with my bag, my folks looked frightened. Where do you think you are going? My father demanded. I'm going to the police station to provide a statement. And then I'll stay with a pal for a time. My mother started wailing loudly. You cannot leave. We need to deal with this as a family. We stopped being a functional family a long time ago, I responded. Maybe we never were. My father moved in front of the door, barring my exit. If you step out that door and do this, don't bother coming back. You will no longer be welcome in this home. If you do this to your brother, you are choosing to destroy this family. I stared him directly in the eyes. No, father, I am not destroying the family. I refuse to let the family destroy me anymore. And if you are truly willing to abandon me because I did not allow it to happen, I am fine with it. I stepped around him and exited the door. He called after me, something about ungrateful children and family loyalty, but I didn't turn back. I got into my car and proceeded to the police station. The formal statement giving my formal declaration took around 1 hour. The officer outlined what would come next. Tristan would be charged with filing a fraudulent police report, attempting insurance fraud, and possibly other offenses relating to the original DUI crash, which had never been properly recorded. This can become messy, she cautioned me. Family cases frequently do. Are you certain you want to proceed? I nodded. I'm sure. When I left the police station, I received a text from my pal Chris. Have your room ready. I ordered food. Don't be late, brother. I had called him earlier to inquire if I could stay at his apartment for a few days. And being the reliable friend he is, he did not even ask questions. As I drove to Chris's apartment, my phone flooded with texts and phone calls from my relatives. I turned off my phone and continued driving. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt as if I was actually standing up for myself. Chris was waiting on his porch as I pulled up, holding 2 sodas. He didn't immediately ask for more information. He simply assisted me with my stuff and said, "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." And in that moment, I discovered something significant. This was how real families were meant to feel. Not obligated, not manipulation, not a perpetual competition. Only unconditional support. The kind I had never seen at home. Edit 1. Holy crap, this exploded up overnight. Thank you for the accolades and support, Reddit, it means a lot. Edit 2. Stay tuned for an update, which will be available soon. LOL, that rhymed. Update, hey Reddit, it's been a while since my previous post, and many of you have DM'd me asking for an update on the Tesla bro problem. So, here goes. I left my parents' place 6 months ago with a duffel bag and a newfound backbone. Best decision I've ever made. I crashed with Chris for a few weeks before finding my own house. Nothing spectacular, just a 1-bedroom apartment where no one begs me to solve their problems. Tristan's case progressed fast. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, blood alcohol levels from the hospital the night of the incident, which my parents attempted to conceal, and an insurance inquiry report. He ended up pleading guilty to all charges and received 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, a huge fine. He lost his license for 5 years. My parents were not charged, but they did face significant fines for their involvement in the insurance scam. They're essentially broke after paying legal expenses, fines, and the remaining payments on a totaled Tesla. As for me, I received a promotion at work. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not always dealing with family issues. In addition, I'm taking night school to pursue an MBA. Life is currently fairly good. The update you've been waiting for: text messages and phone calls resumed last month. First, from my mother. Then my father. Finally, Tristan used his jail-approved phone time. They all had the same message, only delivered in various ways. They need money. Mom took the standard guilt tactic. We're about to lose our house. After everything we've done for you, how can you abandon us now? Dad attempted his typical intimidation. You owe this family. Man up and help us out. Tristan apologized and stated that his time in jail has changed his perspective. Before requesting for commissary funds. Do you know what was very funny? Last week, my folks arrived at my apartment. Unannounced. I have no idea how they got my address, probably through a mutual family connection. They were standing outside my door, looking really pitiful. Both of them had a frantic face. They had an entire pitch planned. They were selling the house but needed funds to move. The bank accounts were frozen. Dad lost his job following the controversy. Mom's anxiousness was flaring up. Couldn't I please assist my family in their time of need? I listened to everything without interrupting. I saw them spin their sob story with a dramatic performance. When they were finished, I just gazed at them for about 10 seconds before asking, "Sorry, I must have missed something during your brief presentation. Could you please remind me which part of attempting to frame me entitled you to my financial assistance? Mom's face collapsed, like if she had been smacked. Dad stood there, speechless. For the first time in their lives, they had no script ready. The roles were flipped, and they had no idea how to play someone who were out of control. But they weren't in their house, where they set the rules. They were at my door. And I had all the cards. I said I'd think about it and close the door. I thought about it. For around 5 seconds. Then I sent this text. The answer is no. Do not contact me again. Dad responded with threats. Mom uses emotional manipulation. Tristan made pledges to change. I blocked all of their numbers. Some people may believe that is harsh. Perhaps it is. But after 24 years being the scapegoat, I'm finally putting myself first. They're adults who've made their decisions. Just as I am making mine right now. So that's all for now, Redditors. Thank you for sticking around during this whole mess. You guys are the finest. I will keep you updated if anything else happens. So, guys, peace out for now. Edit 1. For those thinking of bringing charges against my parents. The DA determined that there was insufficient evidence to indicate they were aware of Tristan's plan beforehand. Personally, I believe they knew. But, whatever. The financial ramifications they are currently facing are most likely harsher than what the courts would have done anyhow. Edit 2. To the few people who messaged me stating, but they're still your family. Oh, come on. Being connected by blood does not give somebody the authority to frame you for a felony. That is not how family works. That's how prison gangs operate. LOL, that rhymed. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a while since my previous post, and many of you have DM'd me asking for an update on the Tesla bro problem. So, here goes. I left my parents' place 6 months ago with a duffel bag and a newfound backbone. Best decision I've ever made. I crashed with Chris for a few weeks before finding my own house. Nothing spectacular, just a one-bedroom apartment where no one begs me to solve their problems. Tristan's case progressed fast. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, blood alcohol levels from the hospital the night of the incident, which my parents attempted to conceal, and an insurance inquiry report. He ended up pleading guilty to all charges and received 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, a huge fine. He lost his license for 5 years. My parents were not charged, but they did face significant fines for their involvement in the insurance scam. They're essentially broke after paying legal expenses, fines, and the remaining payments on a totaled Tesla. As for me, I received a promotion at work. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not always dealing with family issues. In addition, I'm taking night school to pursue an MBA. Life is currently fairly good. The update you've been waiting for: text messages and phone calls resumed last month. First, from my mother. Then my father. Finally, Tristan used his jail-approved phone time. They all had the same message, only delivered in various ways. They need money. Mom took the standard guilt tactic. We're about to lose our house. After everything we've done for you, how can you abandon us now? Dad attempted his typical intimidation. You owe this family. Man up and help us out. Tristan apologized and stated that his time in jail has changed his perspective. Before requesting for commissary funds. Do you know what was very funny? Last week, my folks arrived at my apartment. Unannounced. I have no idea how they got my address, probably through a mutual family connection. They were standing outside my door, looking really pitiful. Both of them had a frantic face. They had an entire pitch planned. They were selling the house but needed funds to move. The bank accounts were frozen. Dad lost his job following the controversy. Mom's anxiousness was flaring up. Couldn't I please assist my family in their time of need? I listened to everything without interrupting. I saw them spin their sob story with a dramatic performance. When they were finished, I just gazed at them for about 10 seconds before asking, "Sorry, I must have missed something during your brief presentation. Could you please remind me which part of attempting to frame me entitled you to my financial assistance?" Mom's face collapsed, like if she had been smacked. Dad stood there, speechless. For the first time in their lives, they had no script ready. The roles were flipped, and they had no idea how to play someone who were out of control. But they weren't in their house, where they set the rules. They were at my door. And I had all the cards. I said I'd think about it and close the door. I thought about it. For around 5 seconds. Then I sent this text. The answer is no. Do not contact me again. Dad responded with threats. Mom uses emotional manipulation. Tristan made pledges to change. I blocked all of their numbers. Some people may believe that is harsh. Perhaps it is. But after 24 years being the scapegoat, I'm finally putting myself first. They're adults who've made their decisions. Just as I am making mine right now. So that's all for now, Redditors. Thank you for sticking around during this whole mess. You guys are the finest. I will keep you updated if anything else happens. So, guys, peace out for now. Edit 1. For those thinking of bringing charges against my parents. The DA determined that there was insufficient evidence to indicate they were aware of Tristan's plan beforehand. Personally, I believe they knew. But, whatever. The financial ramifications they are currently facing are most likely harsher than what the courts would have done anyhow. Edit 2. To the few people who messaged me stating, "But they're still your family." Oh, come on. Being connected by blood does not give somebody the authority to frame you for a felony. That is not how family works. That's how prison gangs operate. My mom chose my toxic stepsister over me and kicked me out. Now, I got engaged, and my fiancé's company dropped her husband. She blames me. I, 26F, have been engaged to my fiancé, whom we'll call Jeff, 26M, for approximately 2 months. I met him 4 years ago on a dating app, and we've been inseparable since. Jeff and I are soulmates. He is the only person in my life who has never disappointed me. I have not had an easy life. My parents divorced when I was 2 years old. My father abandoned us without looking back. He paid child support, but that was it. He never bothered to come and see how I was doing. To be honest, my mother, 48F, was not a terrific mother either. When I was younger, she was more focused on other activities than on raising me. I was basically reared by nannies and babysitters. When I was a little older, my mother was quite young, and her priorities were very different. She didn't care much about becoming a mother and spent most of her time with friends or on dates. She was an outgoing socialite who had no time for me. Even in terms of her career, she was not taking her work seriously. She was a freelance artist who made good money every month, but she didn't have to worry about me since she had child support checks coming in to cover everything. I hate to say it, but if it hadn't been for the child support, I'm very sure she would have kicked me out a long time ago. She was never very devoted to me, and I suspected she was waiting for me to mature so I could leave her alone. Then, when I was around 13, she began seeing my stepfather. My stepfather, Matt, 50 million, has a daughter around my age. We'll call my stepsister Jess. When they initially started dating and my mother brought his family home to introduce us, she advised me to be on my best behavior since this was very important to her. Now, Mom had brought home boyfriends dozens of times before, but she had never been concerned about how I behaved. She would generally just tell me that she had guests coming over, and I would use that as a cue to go into my room and stay until they went. But this time, I had the impression she was serious about the person, otherwise, she would not have been concerned about my actions. To put it another way, if she wasn't serious about Matt, she wouldn't have worried about my presence in the house at all. The first time I met him and his daughter, they were relatively kind to me, and it was a pleasant introduction. I had no idea what was going to happen to me following that initial meeting. Soon after, he began to visit more frequently, and it seemed as if they had almost moved in together. I didn't mind it. It wasn't bothering me in any way, so I had no need to worry about them as long as they allowed me to go on with my life. It remained that way for a long time. They were practically living together, and Jess would occasionally visit as well. Her mother was still a part of her life, therefore she spent half of each month at her mother's house. Initially, people were either polite to me or ignored me. I was fine with that because I didn't really care for any of them. I didn't really care about my mother, so it was tough for me to care about anyone related to her. All I wanted was my own peace and quiet, which I enjoyed for a while. But then they decided to make it a permanent relationship and move in together. Now, I wouldn't have cared, but my mother informed me that now that they were moving in together, I would have to start sharing my room with my stepsister. I refused to do that because it was my room. It had been my room my entire life, and it was the one thing that gave me calm. In that house, I had my own private area. I was not going to give up my freedom by sharing a room with someone I barely know. When I told my mother that I was not going to share my room, we had a heated quarrel. She threatened to kick me out of the house if I did not do what she asked. I was 14 years old at the time, and despite my youth, I was aware of the law. I felt compelled to since my mother was the type of person you couldn't truly trust. It's also plain basic logic, and I knew mother couldn't send me out until I was an adult, or she'd face legal consequences. So I informed her that I knew she couldn't do it and that she was faking. She was frustrated, but she had to let me have my room and chose to convert the basement into Jess's room. It wasn't a very horrible place to be. It wasn't as nice as my room, but my mother worked hard to make it more appealing and livable. By the time she was finished, it looked as good as any other room in the home, so I had no idea what the big issue was. But for some reason, that's when Jess started disliking me. It could have had something to do with the fact that on the day she moved in with us, my mother gave them a house tour and made it clear to everyone that Jess had to live in the basement since I wasn't ready to share my room. I didn't understand why she would make such an announcement, and I still can't think of a rationale. Perhaps she intended to make me feel bad by stating it in front of Jess, but all it did was make me feel strange and uncomfortable. It made me feel embarrassed for her, but I didn't feel bad about putting my foot down. Or perhaps she simply enjoyed drama and wanted Jess to know that I had refused to share my room with her, which would undoubtedly lead to difficulties between us. Jess did not appear to be the type of girl who would tolerate something like this. My mother was correct. Jessica refused to let it go. After that day, she began treating me as an adversary. She would still spend half of the month with her mother, but the days she would be living with us were excruciatingly difficult for me. She was a threat to society, and she had a personal vendetta against me. She was frequently nasty to me and made horrible statements about me right in front of my face. To give you an example of what she would say, she once told me that the reason my father left my mother was most likely because of me. Then she laughed, as if it were hilarious. She would make fun of my appearance because I was slightly fat at the time. She used to make fun of me at school for no apparent reason. Jess had a huge clique of mean females at school, and she would never miss a chance to bully me with her friends. Earlier, she and her pals would simply ignore me, which I loved. She and I were never friends, but that was vastly preferable to being her enemy. The saddest aspect was that I had done nothing to her. She was simply offended that I did not want to share my room with her. It was a ridiculous cause to hate me so much and try to ruin my life. My room was my safe area, and with a mother like mine, I don't think anyone can blame me for wanting my own space. Besides, if any of them had ever made an effort to get to know me, I could have shared my room with her. But she was a stranger to me, and I didn't feel comfortable giving up my independence for her. I never complained to my mother or Matt because they were aware of the situation and it was meaningless to do so. They didn't care. I might be bullied my entire life, and they would still turn a blind eye since I was not important to them. So I had to put up with it and let her trample all over me. I would fight back periodically, but I quickly realized that it only escalated the conflict. Our parents would intervene, and I would be grounded because they despised me. She would constantly cry a little to get out of trouble. But I couldn't cry on command like her, and I wasn't as manipulative. So I'd be the one who was punished for my poor behavior and advised to start treating Jess like a sister, while she got away with it and I had to face the consequences. It was a miserable place to grow up, and I despised my existence. So when I was finally kicked out around my 18th birthday, I was relieved more than anything else. I had put up with my family's crazy for years before being kicked out, and it only became worse over time. Jess continued to be a nightmare to deal with, and our parents continued to back her without questioning the legitimacy of her actions. In 4 years, she had managed to turn our whole high school year against me, and I had just a few friends who would even talk to me. Everyone else despised me because she did, and that was sufficient justification. It had taken a toll on my mental health, and I was battling to keep up in all areas. I had acquired a lot of weight from binge eating, and it had severely changed my appearance for the worst. I was overweight, acne-prone, and had pretty awful hair. I was also trying to maintain my grades. So not only did I look horrible, but I also appeared to be dumb to everyone else. I had nothing going for me and was at an all-time low. Things at home were no better, as I still had to deal with Jess and my parents. My mother had grown increasingly irritable and would continually compare me to Jess, despite the fact that she was the one who had made my life so much worse than it had been previously. Things were terrible before my mother married Matt and they moved in together, but not as horrible as they are now. Yeah, it was terrible that my mother didn't care about me before, but after her marriage to Matt, I went from the frying pan to the fire. She progressed from not caring to intentionally making me feel horrible about myself, and it felt as if I was also living with mean females at home. It was very clear to me that Jess was the daughter my mother had hoped for. Instead, life had dealt her the wrong hand, and she was stuck with me. I know they both wanted nothing more than for me to leave, and to be honest, I did too. My mother and Jess despised me, but Matt didn't care. I have no relatives to speak of other than my mother because my grandparents did not communicate with us. I had never known my father, and I knew nothing about my other grandparents. I actually had nowhere to go, and I felt awkward approaching my friends for assistance. So I had to fight it out and stay with my mother to ensure that I had a roof over my head and food to eat every day until I reached 18. But then, a few weeks before my birthday, an incident occurred, and I was expelled out the same day. It was a weekend, Yet, I remember it like it was yesterday since it was one of the most terrible and stressful days of my life. We had both recently graduated, and she had begun hanging out with a bigger circle of folks. She had a buddy whose brother was in his senior year of college, and she was dating her brother. So she and her friend would hang out with his pals, who were all older than us. I understood exactly what they were up to, but I didn't think it was worth bringing it up with my parents because, with my luck, it would only backfire. So I never told anyone that she'd started drinking. And, while I couldn't prove it, I knew she was smoking pot and whatnot. I was never interested in any of it because, first and foremost, I never had friends who were cool enough to have access to drink, cigarettes, or drugs. Second, I was already suffering with my weight and academics. I didn't need to add drink or drugs to the mix, I already had plenty on my plate. But that day, I believe I left my room unlocked before going for a shower. The next thing I knew, I heard a banging on the bathroom door, and my mother was yelling at me, insisting that I come out right once. I had to rush and put on my clothes so I could see what she was talking about. When I got out of the shower, my mother, Matt, and Jess were waiting in my room, all with serious expressions on their faces. My mother took out a bunch of empty beer bottles from beneath my bed, and even more incriminating, there was a giant plastic baggie containing, I'm not sure how many grams of weed. My parents were unaware that it did not belong to me or Jess. I believe she had planted it in my room when I was not there and then informed my mother. They began flipping out and yelling at me about what a terrible person I was. She didn't just yell at me about the drink and drugs, she also started venting about how I was a complete disgrace to them. She protested that I ate all the food. She stated I was a waste. She was convinced that I would never do anything worthwhile in the future and would simply continue to live with them and spend their money. I attempted to explain multiple times that none of it belonged to me and that I had no idea how it ended up in my room, but she didn't believe me. She lost it when I suggested that Jess might have planted it in my room to get me in trouble. She began yelling at me about how I was always jealous of her and that I would never be as good as her at anything, which was why I was attempting to shift the blame. I was crying uncontrollably by that point, but she didn't seem to care and proceeded to rant at me. After some while, she stopped shouting at me and told me I needed to leave. I had no idea what she was talking about, so I asked her where I was heading. She told me she didn't care where I went. She just wanted me out of the house because she was tired of dealing with me. When I refused to go, she threatened to call the cops on me. She added that because I was almost 18, they would treat the drug allegations very seriously. She informed me she did not want an addict living with her and consuming all of her money and resources. I had to watch out for myself now since she was tired of pretending to be a happy family with someone who deserved nothing. I was pleading with her not to force me out because, while I wanted to leave, I knew I had nowhere to go and didn't have enough money on my own. But my mother didn't care. She informed me that if I didn't leave within that day, she would phone the police and report me herself. I was surprised that she could be so cruel, and even more so that neither Matt nor Jess complained about it. They were literally going about their day as if nothing was happening. After a lot of crying and begging, I finally started packing my belongings. I would gladly choose to live on the streets over being arrested for drug possession. I finished packing by the evening, and as I left the house, no one said goodbye, and I never looked back. I went to the park and sat on a seat for a few hours, but it got pretty cold. So I decided to go over to a friend's apartment and spend the night there, hoping they would let me. I went to my best friend Amy's house and asked if I could stay with her for a few days. She already knew how my parents were, so I didn't need to explain much to her. When I told her about what had happened that day, she was horrified. She said her parents could help me if I allowed them. I'd always urged her not to tell anyone about how my parents treated me, including her parents, because I wasn't sure if anyone would believe me. I guess I felt awkward revealing these sensitive information about my life with others. But that day, she compelled me to inform her parents, who were as appalled as Amy was. They called my mother and attempted to speak with her, but it didn't help, and she was quite unpleasant to them. So they recognized that talking to her would not make things any better. Then they did something for which I am grateful beyond words. They promised me I could stay with them for as long as I needed to and that they would assist me. They were wealthy, so money was not an issue, and Amy adored me, so she was willing to share a room with me. I spent the following few years living with them and attending community college, which was the only place I could get accepted due to my poor grades. I began working and accumulating money to buy my own place, but Amy's parents made sure I never felt pressured to leave their home and made me as comfortable as they could. Then, roughly 3 years ago, I finally acquired enough money to move out. I was proud of myself, and I was also grateful to Amy and her parents. I honestly could not have done it without them. Even on the day I moved out, They were the ones who helped me settle into my new home and informed me that I was welcome to return whenever I wanted to visit or even live with them. That was the turning point in my life. By then, I'd shed a lot of weight and my health had improved significantly. I felt and looked better. I was also generating enough money to support myself and had put in enough effort to improve myself. So I decided to start dating as well because I wanted to marry someday and needed to start searching. I met a couple of guys before Jeff, but it usually fizzled out before it could get serious. After meeting Jeff, I fully understood why. It was because Jeff and I were intended to be together, whereas the other guys I met before him were only there to have fun. When we first started dating, I had no idea he was wealthy and the heir to his father's firm. I just liked him because he was humorous and cute, and he appeared to like me as well. After a few months of dating, he informed me about his family, and I understood they owned a restaurant chain, which he would inherit in a few years after his father retired. Many people may believe that learning how wealthy he was changed things for me, but I simply regarded him as the same person I had known before. That information made no difference to me. I still loved him as much as I did before. We moved in together after approximately a year of dating, and he had introduced me to his family a few months earlier. Everyone in his family liked me, and we got along great. Everything was absolutely perfect. So, when he recently asked if I wanted to marry him, I knew the answer right away. We've been engaged for 2 months now, and things are going great. But then, around 2 weeks ago, I got an email from Jess. We haven't spoken in almost 8 years, and I haven't heard from my family since I was kicked out. I had no idea why she would contact me now, especially to make amends. I believe enough time has passed, and neither of us cares enough to try to mend the problem anymore. So when I received that email and understood she was reaching out to me to apologize for all that had happened in the past and admit that she had been a complete nightmare, I was perplexed. She admitted to placing stuff in my room to get me tossed out since she disliked me for no reason. I had no understanding why she was revealing all of that so many years later, and I sensed something was wrong with the situation. The timing was further suspect because I had recently gotten engaged, and I knew she must have known about it. I had mentioned it on social media, and we attended the same high school, so someone must have told her about it. Everything felt odd, so I started to investigate. As a result, I discovered that the man Jess was married to also owned the company that supplied plastic containers and other items for takeaway orders to Jeff's restaurants. It was easy for me. All I had to do was create a phony profile and stalk her. From there, I went to her husband's profile, where he disclosed everything about his work in his bio, so it was a simple process. I already knew a lot about Jeff's business because we had planned to run it together after his father retired, so I was already learning the ropes. When I realized this was the individual he was dealing with, I immediately alerted Jeff. Now, over the past few years, I've done my best not to think about my previous life since I just wanted to go on. So I didn't follow anyone from my family online, and I told my friends not to tell me anything about them. I had no idea Jess was already married and had been for a few years. But when I discovered that her husband was actually interacting with us, Jeff and I decided to cancel our arrangement. It was already costing us a lot of money, and I don't think I'd ever do business with that woman again. Jeff also informed me that the quality of the things delivered by her husband had reduced significantly since the beginning. They were considering dropping him as a supplier anyhow and were in talks with another guy who offered lower prices and better products. So, last week, a few days after I received Jess's email, Jeff decided to meet with her husband and cancel their contract. But, for some reason, Jess believes I did this on purpose to get her back, and she has been accusing me of it in her emails and social media posts. We haven't spoken in about a decade, but she still believes I am carrying a grudge against her. Which I may be, but that is not the true reason her husband lost our contract. She posted a few days ago that many of her clients had already dropped them, and this was the final straw. But she maintains that I did it out of spite, and that this was really unprofessional of us. She tagged our Facebook page in her post, and things have gotten pretty ugly. I feel awful for her because, according to her message, she and her husband have been losing business left and right. Okay, I'll admit that some of this was personal, but much of it was business as well. I doubt Jeff and his father would have dropped her husband as a supplier based only on my word. Nevertheless, I feel awful for her. I'm not sure if I should have made my fiancé quit working with my estranged stepsister's husband. Update 1. Okay, so Jeff has spoken with his father's lawyers, and he believes we did the correct thing. So we're going after them legally and asking that they remove that message. We are also filing defamation charges against them because the guy charged us a bomb and delivered things that fell short of our expectations. If we could obtain a better offer somewhere else, we'd obviously go there. It's just a coincidence that Jess is married to the guy who runs that firm. Instead of improving their company's operations, she chose to trash us on social media. It's stupid that I allowed myself to feel horrible for her after everything she'd put me through. But you guys truly opened my eyes, so I appreciate that. Many of you have been quite supportive, which I appreciate. Thank you so much for your comments. Update 2. So Jeff and his father filed a slander claim against Jess and her husband a few days ago. We'll meet with a court-appointed mediator in a week, maybe. But in the meantime, my mother has taken it upon herself to protect her poor little stepdaughter yet again. It is so silly. I feel like I am back in high school. But, happily, I'm not back in high school, so I can simply disregard what they say. Unlike then, I don't need to be in my mother's books to get a roof over my head. So she may cry all she wants about it, but nothing will change. She has been attempting to contact me for the past few days, ever since Jess was served, but I have simply blocked her and gone on with my life. I don't need that type of negativity around me. I am engaged. I'm going to marry the guy of my dreams, and I don't need her or her insane stepdaughter back in my life. Update 3. Hey, so let me quickly fill you in. First, we won the defamation lawsuit. It wasn't even that difficult because my father-in-law's lawyers are absolute sharks, and they killed her and her husband. So, maybe they'll focus more on their business now and meet their clients' expectations. They had to pay for what they stated, and we were able to strike an agreement. So that's over, and we can finally devote all of our attention to preparing our wedding. It's quite thrilling, and I can't wait to get married to Jeff. As previously stated, he is my soulmate, and I have waited a long time to find someone like him. Now that I have him, I will never let go.